Welcome back, folks. 皆さん、おかえりなさい。今日は40日目です。It is day 40, the 10 days behind us. We're gonna hop right in. Today seems like a relatively short day, so we've gotten to the point where I can kind of see, I think we've got the full cycle down, and this seems like an excellent way to dictate what the regular daily schedule is. So we're about like 62. So roughly, right, it kind of drops down as they upgrade. So I think we've almost reached the full cycle. No, there's still one more. So then you can have like another peak day. So the highest peak day before burned. So you can kind of see how they're stacking like this. What's up? And don't worry, I didn't stop learning Duolingo. It's just not for me anymore. I didn't stop learning? Oh, Duolingo is just not for you anymore. Okay. I think so. There's a comma there, right? Gozo, I think. You're saying what's up? And don't worry, you didn't stop learning. Period. Comma. Duolingo is just not for you anymore. That's fair. Oh, because you're referring to the streak, probably. Yeah, some peeps or some maybe like I would have noticed. Yeah, that's fine. So what are you doing now? So right now, let's see. We still need to reach enlighten, like push these to enlighten to see what the full peak is on WaniKani. So if I were to take a guess, let's say we move 50, shove 50 right away. So it goes as high as 3 2 about 300 if they all stack on the same peak. Oh wait, but this is assuming these guys don't drop. So we subtract 50. Oh, okay, we're looking at about 200 by the time the full cycle is when we hit burned. All right. So yesterday we only had 2 things, not too bad. Not too bad. What was the deal with this one? You're using an app called Do Chinese? That's fine. And generally use it alongside ChatGPT? Uh-huh. As stories can look at meaning of words and grammar. Yeah, I'm familiar with Do Chinese structure. Sounds good. Yeah, sounds good. We'll be doing LLMs later as well. What's this? This is WaniKani. We're on Japanese right now. Let's see. So 묘지 묘지 and we jumped the gun on this, but it's cool. Right, not too bad. Not much to review from yesterday. Let's hop into our review. 24 minutes until 7 for 28. Okay. WaniKani is a SRS system. It's an SRS system for kanji. And our 2025 projects are WaniKani and Hanzahiro. Hanzahiro is an SRS system for Chinese. And we're on the traditional course on Hanzahiro. So those are 2025 projects. And then a little down the line, we'll be using an LLM for Chinese. Haven't decided we're going to do traditional or simplified yet. Yeah, those are some of the projects. Is Hansa Hero free? It is free to try. It is free to try for the first 100 characters learned. That's about a month to see if you like it, but it is a subscription based. Both of these are subscription based. So whatever you see in WaniKani, it has a very similar. You can also, through investment of your own, customize an Anki using the Anki platform to create similar experience. Yeah, you have an income, you're gonna stick to some free alts. That's fair. But Do Chinese is not free. So just thought I make that connection. But yes. Unless you have some sort of free trial as well, which Do Chinese uses a similar model when it comes to pricing. Okay. I'm not a person who promotes or encourages that, but I'm glad you can get your resources where you have to, right? All right. So hop in. So oh, I forgot to switch something. Never mind. Guess we'll do it next time. Just gonna try out something here. Oh, is this the sheep leader, right? By doing. Bolseki? Oops. This is, yeah, off to the new year. Oops. So how to ahead for tip, right? This was the exception because of commonality. The uni. Oops. Make sure I don't make a typo. Ah, I missed the Rendaku. That's fine. Fine. Oh no. Heckin' Rendaku. You're gonna study? Good luck, good luck. Good luck. What was I doing? Oh. Again, Rendaku. Oh yeah, this is the one we... Yeah. Okay. Oh, that's kind of a little triggering. Just a wee bit. Oh, we finished before 7? Oh, we have 15 minutes left. Maybe we can do some extra studying. Recent lessons. Just squeeze in some time. Do at least our 7. So, dang it, Rendaku. That's fine. That's fine. Let's... Sure. I'll boost it to 7, but yeah, I'm gonna have to bite the bullet, Gecko, at some point so I can shift my schedule earlier and earlier because it's divisible by 4. You know how the SRS is always divisible by a full 24 hours, so every time it keeps getting later and later, and it's one of those things that I keep giving myself an excuse to make the sessions later and later, and I don't think that's gonna work really well with the coming stuff. Oh, but today, 14 minutes? It's 14 minutes off, right? I keep telling myself that it's 14 minutes off. Let's do some extra study. Let's see. Let's do some extra study. I haven't done this in a while. So this time I'm not gonna worry about... Okay, I got it. Let's do this. Oops. Oh, the review is in order though. Oh, actually this is not bad. Not bad. I was gonna change it to ordered for the reviews, but if the extra study is in order, that gives me... That's excellent. It helps me swap it up. Nice. Oh, we might just add this. This might be sufficient for ordered and unordered at the same time. That's I'm not sure if that was intentional, but that is exactly what I was thinking. We could try talking about something for 14 minutes, but then before we know it is usually such a point. I know. The last couple of days, like yesterday, I thought I was gonna. Okay, we should talk, right? The other day, yesterday, I thought I was gonna get to bed early, and it didn't happen because I ended up talking during WaniKani and Anzahiro. So I'm not sure how I'm gonna balance this stuff. I obviously, the lessons actually come second. They're not really as priority. It's more about the talking thing. The nice thing about talking, I would say, the hidden benefits, quote unquote, the hidden benefits of talking is that it it rounds up the intention of streaming in the first place. You know, it gets people to feel consistent or continue to want to come back, right? And what I mean by come back is come back to thinking, come back to discussing. I think that is one of the hidden benefits that are rarely felt when you spend so much time focused on progress. It's kind of like sometimes when you go to work and it from day to day and year to year, it becomes a little less colored, right? And then suddenly, I don't know, maybe you get a new colleague and the colleague is just like, hey, yo, and it kind of distills and dysregulates a bit of your schedule, and that kind of breathes new life into it. It's like, oh yeah, this is something. The reason why I was a lot later yesterday is because while you guys, you know, Gecko, you're on YouTube, I've been talking to someone in the same time on the other end, and Procall had an unfortunate thing happen yesterday. This weekend he was Procall was supposed to go off and enjoy a football game, European soccer, right? Football game, and it turns out that he got robbed or mugged or something, and he was coming back. He was trying to get some sleep before taking the trip back. Hopefully he had a safe trip back. That's really unfortunate. I wanted to hear about his game. I think he missed the train and then didn't go to the game, and then something bad happened. So that was kind of very unfortunate near the end. Hopefully the person is doing fine today, managed to get home, be around family and friends. So that's kind of how that went. I'm kind of curious in the next day or two. Yeah. The person is safe, you know, no harm, that kind of thing. But I imagine that really shakes things up. And I believe they gave me the impression that that was the first time that's happened. And I try to reflect on that too. My parents and I, as far as I know, during our adult life, that hasn't occurred. I used to go to university. Procall is at university right now, so they're kind of sort of away. And my only reference I could get is that has usually been a concern for pretty much all the years that I've been at a university. So, but I wasn't, let's just say I was lucky enough to not have that happen, while colleagues around me have that occur. Even my mentor have had that occur before. It's good to hear that that person was safe. Yeah. You've never been mugged or robbed yourself, but I always thought it would be quite traumatizing, even if it's usually considered not that severe, so to speak, compared to other things that can happen. Exactly. Yeah. Like, I hear it a lot in, it's kind of notorious where my university used to be. It's one of the cities that have arguably the top crime rates, and the large majority of the crimes are petty theft. So that type of thing, it is, you hear about it, it does occur quite more than one might want to admit a lot of times. And it hadn't happened to me, so it was very difficult for me to find specific words to say other than I'm glad to hear that that person was okay. They weren't incredibly shaken, especially when you're away, right? These things, I feel the gravity of these occurrences happen largely in a state where you don't have immediate, you may not have immediate people to go back to, right? Usually that involves selecting yourself when you're away or traveling alone, that kind of thing. For me, I think outside of commuting between work, which during my time, I basically commuted across the street. So in order to like reduce the chance of me, I work really late. I like go back and forth between the campus, like really late in the day, like 1 a.m.s and whatnot. But my place of residence is across the street, so I paid a premium to be right across the street, right? And there are things that I've done to understandably know that these things happen, but at the same time it minimizes or attempts to minimize that. And when I'm traveling, I usually don't walk around alone, because largely walking around alone in a quote-unquote foreign place, like a place that I don't frequent, like traveling to go to a convention and stuff, it's usually in mass, like either groups or people I'm working with, friends and family. So kind of unfortunate. It's been a while. It's been a while since I've talked to someone online, and by sheer coincidence, something like this occurred. So, not quite that experienced in saying stuff or possibly doing stuff that may help, right? As a maybe for some comfort or some danger. Oftentimes, I strongly rely on vicarious experiences and stories that I carry from other people. And then ultimately, the strongest thing would be to have some sort of empathy, but I don't have any firsthand empathy in this case. So I was quite sympathetic, whether that person wanted sympathy or not. Generally, I try to be as sympathetic as possible while trying to maybe tactfully distract the person, or maybe use it as a learning lesson. But it probably happened the day of that. A couple of years ago, your mom was involved in armed robbery at her local store while doing groceries. Not as a perpetrator, if clarification is needed. I see. I knew she was quite rattled by this event, even though technically she was just a witness, not even a victim, as nothing was stolen from her. Oh, interesting. Ah. The closest thing that has happened in my life was kids, when we were kids, stealing, right? Like kids trying to steal things from me, and they succeeded, but that's very, that's very different. It's kids stealing in a environment that is clearly chaperoned by adults. Usually it's things like on the school bus during recess or something like that, where they are things that are either destroyed in the process or bullying related things. Those things don't necessarily translate to the same thing as being alone and having the feeling of powerlessness can be bad. And I'm not trying to trivialize traumatizing, like childhood trauma, because childhood trauma can be incredibly egregious and persistent into adulthood. In fact, it might actually shape adulthood. So I'm not trying to say it's trivial, but it's different. It's significantly different enough that from this situation, it would be a very inappropriate way to think about how one would overcome early childhood trauma versus something that can be traumatic in adulthood. So more akin to bullying probably then. I'm not downplaying bullying, by the way. Yeah, same here. Exactly. But pro call, that was I'm pretty sure that was petty theft. So pro call was traveling away. It sounded like petty theft. Hopefully, it sounds like from the way the person spoke, pretty strong constitution, so that's reassuring, right? And I actually don't know much more, but it got me thinking, right, that my last evening is when I thought about it. Actually, let's just go back home because we have 2 minutes before the 7 o'clock bell. Yeah, it's unfortunate. My mentor got mugged one time as well during my like 6-7 year stay at the university. She was okay too. Actually, most of my colleagues who were involved in a robbery, they are all fine. They behave appropriately, right? I think when you have very stable, healthy people, they tend to be fairly composed when it comes to these things, thankfully, right? Yeah. That was my thought the whole day, including this earlier today. Doesn't need to happen. Well, you may argue it probably did happen largely because of desperation. Yeah. So that's the story I had today. Right. Oftentimes this is the remedy is to laugh off that everyone is safe, right? You put a smile, try to put on a good smile for anyone who talks about these things. You live another day. Prokal made this interesting, funny comment. I was using like constitution and gaming things, and I was talking about, well, now you get to look forward to the other parts of life. And then he made a comment along the lines, well, yep, we get to look forward to all the little nerfs in the future, right? Nerfs in the future. I'm like, yeah, and we get to work on all the buffs, right? This unfortunate happening is nothing more than a temporary debuff, right? Back to skill building with you. I think some days life can just suck. Yeah, I know, without any particular reason. That's something we all need to reconcile in one way or another. Indeed. Yeah. That's kind of our last discussion yesterday. Today, well, what's a story? Oh, here's a story about WaniKani. So there's a new user on WaniKani who posted a thread. I'm not sure if you read threads or forums at all. I like reading threads and forums in like closed off communities because they have an element of nuance, right? They're quite focused, so it can be a very different than an algo providing you with generalized feedback towards your own interest. So the thread today was a new user, or actually not a new user, like a vet sort of middle ground user around where you are the last time you mentioned. They mentioned, so what do you do? Like, I already started considering this. So do you go as fast as possible and don't accuracy chase, or do you slow down and intentionally study to prevent accuracy? And my thought about this person was just asking, and then you can imagine all the different permutations of that, and the permutation that I've come to this time, which is how I wrap around this is I pause for the things I'm weak at, and then I push my limits to a point where I have to pause. So that's kind of what I typically do. So as opposed to saying adhering to a I have to pause and make sure I get the things as a preventive measure, at least my relationship with WaniKani right now is I push to a limit in which the percentage drops below a threshold, providing enough incentive in order for me to pause on certain weak spots. Actually, Hanzahiro yesterday was a little of a blip, largely because I was preoccupied with what was being shared. It's obviously there are more important things than finishing my lesson if someone is having a rough day, right? That occupies most. But I like it when I am pushed myself to a limit in which I make mistakes. That's a way to navigate when to pause and when not to. And occasionally, you know, I make a mistake and I forget to pause, and you just make more mistakes as a like a imbalance from the immediate mistake. So oftentimes I tend to forget to pause. So when the people were answering that question, a few people were talking from like a all or none perspective. Actually, quite a lot of people were talking all or none, for and against, that kind of thing. So like the first person says, I think it's counterproductive. Let SRS do its magic, right? And I was like, okay, yeah, that's pretty much what SRS does. And then another person's like, I think you should spend all the time like it's very polar, right? And then you just stick to one thing, and it's difficult to really get on board with lots of the responses. I think often taking a more dynamic approach, but I guess it can be very straightforward if you make it sound straightforward and you think as a straightforward process. That person, the person who made the thread, asked a bunch of hypotheticals, like, "Oh, should I stop, or should I do this, and should I do this?" And oftentimes, my urge is to type like 3 paragraphs, like an essay worth of all of the above. Like, you navigated all of the above. Provide a form of metric and awareness that allows you to adapt for all of the above. You were very steady in your week progress for 10 months, but then you went on vacation. Oh, so you had a vacation thing too. That's a really common thread too. The whole like vacation all of a sudden for 3 weeks and didn't practice, and when I returned you had a lot of trouble to maintain accuracy. Since then, you're temporarily halted new WaniKani stacking with reviews with the addition of other tools such as Duo. Yeah, that is a really common one. And I like hearing the myriad of people's approaches. Some, you know, constantly bring up vacation mode. Don't forget to turn on vacation mode, that kind of thing. I will be away at least for a weekend somewhere, so it'll be interesting how that works. Alternatively, WaniKani does not actually require that much. It's a static window, so technically you could just web app it. And vacation would be a loose. Oh wait, did I say vacation? No. I'll be away for a weekend, but usually when I'm away, I'm working. So like I haven't shared this before, but once with you specifically, others who know me probably still remember this. Every year I volunteer at a convention called Otakan. Or it's Otakan, but you know, it's otaku and then convention. So Otakan. Otakan is one of the longest, oldest, easily, I would say, the longest running anime conventions in the East Coast. and one of the largest. It's probably the largest in the East Coast. And there's like an East Coast and a West Coast large anime convention. So I it's run by uh Otakor, and all of the people who manage the place are volunteers. So I've been doing this for, I guess next year might be my 7th as a staff member, like as working on with the staff. And I have been going to this convention since 2007 consecutively. So it's the one of the few things that I do, and I like going there because not necessarily I people watch, right? It's not, I do registrations. I'm one of the like 30-ish people behind the counter, like looking at an endless line and welcoming everyone, giving them their badges and stuff. And we do that for, I guess, 8-9 hours for each day of the weekend. And that's what I do. I drive down there, see people doing their thing, walk around occasionally, and see the smiling people. That's what I go to conventions for. It sounds, for lack of a better word, unconventional, but that's kind of the things I like. I like doing things. Back in the earlier days, I used to do like soup kitchens and outreach programs and tutoring and stuff on my spare time. Brings some extra happy dollars again, separating some happy dollars, throwing them out a little where I can. And more recently, Kaniwani, and of course watching me. I want to really reinforce my basics at this point in time before pushing yourself with new material. That's a solid foundation. It sounds like even if you were not to push anymore, I feel like you're in a situation where the more you refine whatever you have existent would be like equivalent to chatting online at this point, if you know what I mean. Like the equivalence of many people who are chatting online. Although based on how you type in English, like just through our chats, your level is above the average execution when it comes to diction and stuff in English. So I imagine your threshold is going to be pushed above, but at the same time, if you consult at your Japanese that you describe, just by inference, has already caressed the functional Japanese. So I imagine you could, once that's like the heart and all solidified, you can hold casual conversations online already. On vacation, you really like to disconnect from habits. Of course, I usually find a bunch of other enriching experiences during the time. I just thought I would have an easier time when returning. I see. Yeah, I don't typically take vacations, weirdly enough. I think I've had tried, I've been on a vacation twice, maybe once or twice, and then all the other ones are I went somewhere, the environment changed, but it was related to something I was doing productively. So like I've been to Canada twice, but the one time was what I include as vacation. That was with my parents, and then the other time it was an orchestra performance. We were doing orchestra stuff, so we were performing then. And then New Zealand was technically away, but it was also a study abroad program, so we're still doing university. But we did take vacations, right? Like I toured the South Island. It's weird, that idea of disconnecting from my usual habits, largely because most of my habits are life skills, as opposed to abstractions of some things. Like right now, talk a little bit. Yeah, right now, learning Japanese and Chinese is not a disconnect from anything I'm already currently doing. So the mindset is a really, really I'm not sure if I can truly empathize with people who want to disconnect from themselves. Maybe because one of the biggest disposition, I could consider this a disposition. The compulsion is to, I compulsively have this thing that would require the skills, my habits to be intact the whole time. Otherwise, the vacation might get worse, as opposed to not exercising it. You don't know what what I'm planning to do, but only a couple of days. I personally wouldn't use vacation mode on WaniKani. Ah, I see. My thing is, I can probably just buy a laptop and do it there, or I just use my smartphone. And probably can do my smartphone. All right, using a web interface and keep the upkeep. I don't sleep during this so-called vacation. I don't use the V word too often. I call it an environmental change most of the time. It's a change of environment, but I'm arguably even more high functioning when I'm away. This is my vacation mode. So I think the turn of phrase in terms of mindset is I'm most relaxed when I'm doing the consistent thing. I am far more active and functional when I'm away from the things I normally do. So in this case, streaming and doing this is the most relaxed thing I can do. Yeah, if you just go on a browser on your boat, you can use WaniKani. It's not the best, yeah, but it's enough, right? It's enough. It's sufficient enough. That's what I did for like Duolingo. Like right now, that's what I'm doing for Duolingo right now. And let's just say Duolingo's threshold is doing one. I can't tell you how quickly one lesson goes by. It's you get the idea why Duolingo is the way Duolingo is, and it really does reflect the whole doom scrolling thing, right? Right now I already wrapped up Duolingo Chinese, and I go back and do legends and stuff, and that takes like 2 minutes. Like you're going back. I'm actually, so right now what I'm doing is whenever I feel like I need to go walk or pace around, stretch a little bit, right? Move my legs a little bit, I actually just grab my phone. I haven't done this because I was learning most of the time. Now that it's practice, right? Duolingo Chinese, for all intents and purposes, is practice now. All of that is practice. So you fill it in. So whenever I get up and I say, I should walk around for like 5 or 10 minutes, stop staring at the screen, right? I get up and I end up doing 3 lessons and then sit back down, bathroom break, get up, walk around like the room or something for 5 minutes, shake off my legs, do another 2 lessons. That's kind of how I feel the magic about having compartmentalized lessons like that, right? Anyways, yeah. Thanks for the share about your where did you vacation, by the way? Yeah, I have a very different mentality when it comes to vacation. Really love to travel, discover cultural and historic sites, feel the atmosphere in foreign, so of course I'm always looking forward to vacation. Yeah, I look forward to vacation too. Not necessarily like the objective is to do exactly what you're saying, only my function, like my activity and energy goes up during a vacation. So oftentimes when people say they come back from vacation more rested, I actually generally come back from vacation more exhausted than I am typically. So one of those like wired people on vacation. Like when I go to Otakon, it's a 4-day. I'll be away for 4 days, right? And generally speaking, in those 4 days, I'll probably sleep at most like 12 hours across the 4 days. And then I'll be back and I'll take it easy for a day or two as I settle back into my routine. But generally speaking, I'm like incredibly hardwired when I'm away. So vacation is an opportunity to do things that I don't normally do. So it goes the other direction. I'm not trying to relax in a vacation. I'm trying to be I'm putting out energy during a vacation, quote unquote vacation. And then when you get back into your routine, that's when I start building up my energy again. You know, spend energy where you can, but usually when you're doing a routine is where you gain most, for me, where I gain most of my energy back, because I can regulate it, I can control it. I know how to get more sleep, squeeze things, and then get myself prepared for the future again. Like whatever comes, whatever opportunity strikes, I have a reservoir of happy dollars to spend at it. So kind of like maybe this might be the opposite for some people. One of the things are when someone says like, I don't want to go back to work, right? Like why can't vacation holidays last longer? Because I don't have the energy to go back to work. I wish I had more vacation. For me, the idea is I spend most of the time at any opportunity to build myself up for occasions that will require that energy. So when you have, I talk to young adults quite a lot where they're like, they dread starting to have to work and whatnot. I have the opposite thing. Like when I was young, the first thing I thought about is I can't wait to get a job, as opposed to the other way around, because most of the time I try my best to routinely be ready for whatever comes. So think bad things can happen, good things can happen. You can have good windfalls and bad windfalls, but generally speaking, I often build myself up every day consistently for anything that's to come. And that also includes vacations, right? Like when someone says, oh, like for example, dating, we kind of mentioned that yesterday. Like, oh, a date. Like, all right, here we go. And all my energy just dumps on the date. So we plan things are really tight. I don't know if the other person is often ready for that, but generally speaking, if I have friends or people close to me, I like to think that they're somewhat excited in a similar way. Otherwise, it would be very difficult to be friends and close friends consistently, right? Largely because my energy will be high and the other person's energy would be low. I understand the whole attraction of vacation where you're there to recuperate energy, right? You go into a vacation with a low energy state. I tend to go into any change of environment with an incredibly high energy state, largely because I spent most of my regular days building myself up in anticipation for those things. Last fall, we took on Eastern Mediterranean cruise. Oh, interesting. In the Mediterranean. That sounds delightful. Went from Italy to Greece, multiple places, Turkey and Cyprus. I see. I really enjoyed it, in particular the historical sites this area. I see. Before that, last spring, you were in Norway. Where's Sub-Zero to provide some commentary here? There in my favorite memories were more about the breathtaking landscapes. I see. You spend hours and hours researching, preparing those vacations. I find it fun, and I'm not the kind of person who likes to simply wing it in unknown places. Yeah. So here's my thought about the whole planning thing. I love the planning process, and I think it's really fun. I like planning for planning's sake, not necessarily planning for it to go right, if you know what I mean. So like, I also enjoy the idea of going in with a plan, but also have the energy to acquire to address anything that's outside the plan. So I like planning plans for the plan as well, largely because it's a special opportunity. Hence the coming on strong all the time. So like a random stranger pops into the stream, I'm already ready. Like, I got a lot of things. I plan to talk to people, if you know what I mean. Like, I think we've already gotten to this routine that you're probably well aware. I have 2 or 3 planned things to talk about that may or may not come up. If they don't come up, I don't mention them. I keep them for next time. So inherently, when I stream, I'm not someone, I don't wait to vibe and have someone else provide something for me. I'm here with planned happy dollars. So whenever I need to fill a space or a time or wait for the review to come up, which we are over 7 now, 7 p.m. local time, that's when we're ready. So I like planning for just planning sake. And then if I don't use the plan, that's okay. The idea is if you don't plan at all, then you don't really get that great at planning, right? Planning, providing contingencies, understanding functionality while being dynamically adapting to other things is a practice skill quite a lot. It might seem very, very effortful at first, which can be very rewarding if it goes well, right? If it goes well. However, I just do it because it's a great skill. It's a great, excellent, almost even cathartic way of saying, all right, we're gonna wing it, but I still have a plan. Let's wing it, but I have a plan, just in case. Just in case. I go there, you know, I'm usually with other people, so I don't usually go alone, right? So I have a plan in my pocket, and I see what other people have. So in my opinion, it sounds like a weird flex maybe, but I'm the contingency plan. I like being a person who can like default to. If something goes wrong, I want to be reliable. I'm available. I'm the guy who tries to work through things calmly, composed, right? Largely because I prefer to use my energy to tackle all the possibilities while alleviating the burden for other people to really do that, because it's not really their desired personality, right? Like, they don't particularly like these things and have to worry about all of these things. It's kind of normalized by my compulsions. Like, if you have to juggle mania every day, right? Wow thoughts and thought spirals, planning something in case something unexpected happens on a vacation or another, that's a walk in the park, in my opinion. So, you know, while people might be a little upset or something didn't go right, we miss a thing that they wanted to do, I got plan B, plan C, and it brings me great joy to have the privilege to execute some of the plans, but it's also fun just to plan in case. At least that's my opinion on that. I plan for the sake of planning, just in case. And other people, they like to live it day at a time, you know, dynamics, and I really appreciate that, and I join them. And anything else that might be unexpected, I'm your guy. I like to be that guy most of the time. It brings me the greatest joy, actually. When someone's down or something didn't go as planned or something was disappointing, plan B, plan C. right? I think that also kind of comes with age. I feel like that's concordant with age. If one becomes older and more experienced, you tend to end up being the person who is a bit more leaning on the resourceful side, right? Old and stable, as opposed to young and potentially volatile, right? So I do have a habit of sitting there, that guy that says nothing, don't contribute to the plan, see what, when in Rome, do as the Romans do, kind of situation. But when something hits the fan, I've got you covered. You're on the same page, not really about sticking to a precise plan made ahead of time, but at least I have a minimum of knowledge, to deal with anything that comes up. Yep, and you learn tons during planning. You also learn tons about your friends and family when you let them do their thing, right? And then the thing that I get to showcase, at least in my opinion, the thing that I want a lot of my friends and family and people around me to know, that is, I got a plan for that. That you have a problem, I'm going to try to help you. Because that brings me the greatest joy in my life, to be able to help something about dealing with the everyday life things, and here I am still doing it. It's the greatest joy, personally. Obviously others maybe debatable, but certainly brings me the greatest joy in life. And with that said, with that happy note, thank you again, Gecko, for the conversations, and now we get to do our other 28 reviews, and then we'll switch to Hanzuhiro, and I hope to start maybe an hour or two even earlier tomorrow. All right. Oh man, maybe we'll talk about this a little later, but I got some extra thoughts. I need to decide when to do the review of the review. I need to decide when I'm gonna do a progress report, like a retrospection on WaniKani's design and Hanzuhiro's design. I'm thinking we're gonna go by a level as opposed to a day. We'll see. Maybe 90 days or something, or 100 days. Some even number somewhere. Thank you, Yasu. Right? Maybe. At first I usually do a month, but that has already passed. So 50 days is a good round number. Talk about tomorrow. Am I going to be watching the Super Bowl? Wait, the Super Bowl's tomorrow? Oh. Oh, that's why my Google news feed had Super Bowl related news stuff. Oh, that explains a lot. Okay. Yes, but not live. Gecko. Yes, but not live. I usually watch it on 2 or 3 times speed, and I like watching the analytics. But I do plan on watching it at some point. I usually don't end up catching these things live, largely due to doing the stuff. I don't take days off. It would be the wildest dreams to be able to watch Super Bowl, stream the Super Bowl without getting slapped in the face, legally. That would be kind of a fun activity. I don't have any immediate friends, nor my family watch Super Bowl, so I watch it whenever I want. Hello there, Omni. How are you? You doing all right? Yeah, but I do watch the main events and some of the playoffs a lot of times of the major sporting things. So that includes Super Bowl, World Cup, Olympics, right? Last year was the Olympics, the Summer Olympics. The World Barclay, all the tennis opens, disc golf, disc golf events, master events, or not master events, but they're open events. I forgot what they call them, elite series or you know. So I watch like the big events quite a lot. Track and field. I think track and field is starting up now. So pretty. You're doing all right, Ami. That's good to hear. Good to hear. All right, all right. We'll have to talk about the game in some way. I haven't engaged in like sports talk, in a while. Who's playing, by the way? Language learning has made me into a caveman. So, who's playing right now? Oh yeah, streaming is a big no-no. Yeah. I guess you could stream yourself and not the game, relying on people having access. Oh, that's fair. That's fair. Other people could be talking about the game while I'm doing this. Yeah. Yeah, it's probably not going to. Sports talk does not come up very often. It's come up way more often now because language learners tend to have other interests, right? Learning is often looked at as a non-pleasure related form of activity, right? And I don't really distinguish between them. Learning is my pleasure activity. However, when it comes to video games, you don't really talk about sports because it is constituted as the pleasure activity, even though I don't distinguish playing video games from the learning activity. So not very much sports talk unless you're willing to talk about esports, which I do keep in to some extent some topical knowledge on esports, right? Things from like Valorant, CS:GO, or not CS:GO, but CS2 now, I suppose. CS2. Not so much like Fortnite related stuff and the more platformy, like social platforms nowadays, but still like Valorant, League of Legends, that type. It's Eagles versus Chiefs. Really? The Philadelphia Eagles. Oh, the Eagles made it to the Super Bowl. Wow. Man, Steeler fans are probably not so happy about that. Technically, since I'm from New York, right? We're on the east side. So more hearing about Philly Eagles fans than Pittsburgh Steelers fans. What are the I don't know where Chiefs are. Kentucky? Or no, Kansas City, right? Kansas. Yes. I said Kentucky. Sorry. The first thing I thought about was Kentucky as a K state, but Kansas. Yeah. I'm Gecko, you're gonna have to explain to me where your enthusiasm for the Super Bowl comes from. Being someone from Belgium. That's I don't hear that very often, actually. All right. So, and then I'm gonna do this now. All right. Just kidding. For a moment there, I'm like, that's right. Maybe you'll be able to tell the result of the game by the mood in your area on Monday. Probably. Yes. Most definitely, probably. Oh, wait. Hear me out. Oh, this is kind of weird. So have a lot of my immediate friends or people that I know that are into football, they actually went to Pittsburgh for college, for like undergrad. They went to Pittsburgh. So actually most of them are Steelers fans. Interestingly enough. Oh, wait, actually, oh, hear me. Oh, this is kind of weird too. Oftentimes, um, fans of the residing state can be fans of other states, and they oh man, I don't even know how. That's interesting. I miss kind of those days where I'm in the city and I would like walk by a pub, right? Or a bar, right? A bar or a sports bar. I don't actually know if there's a separate name for sports bars, but they're sports bars. And I do miss sitting around watching everyone get so passionate about football. I like being in the presence of passion. So like while I can't viscerally be like yeah and stuff, I like watching other people being really happy. It brings me joy. So I kind of miss going to sports bars and stuff and people getting super upset and passionate in within like a reasonable amount. So it's one of those things it it was much later in adulthood that I learned to appreciate going to games, right? Going to a football game. Actually, I haven't ever been to a football game. I've been to a baseball game and a soccer game, right? A soccer game, but that's football. And then American football. I haven't been to an American football game before. It's quite interesting. People are just smiling and having fun. That's it's contagious whether you're interested in it or not. At least in my opinion, it takes a very gloomy person, someone who is incredibly righteously in their mind, in order to not feel contagiously happy when you're around people who are just getting so excited. So um maybe I should consider doing that. I feel like the older I get, the more likely I'm going to spend time doing stuff like that. Let me surprise you then. Football, American, is your favorite sport? The heck? And the only one you really try to follow? Oh, interesting. I even played for several years here in Belgium. Where is a very neat. Really? I'm gonna be real. It is a very weird thought hearing, like even visualizing Belgians playing American football. I would even be more inclined to see rugby before football. And I have seen rugby before. Interesting enough, I've seen the haka being performed by the All Blacks as well back in New Zealand days. So, interesting. That is quite a pleasant surprise. A statistical anomaly you are. And I suddenly started sounding like Yoda all of a sudden. Oh man, you know what? It's less surprising after I just mentioned the Yoda thing because you mentioned Star Wars too. You, and also we talked about like how Belgians, the philosophy, like all the stuff that you highlight, there's a lot of parallelisms, like coincidentally from your perspective, that runs with the Americana culture. So I guess if you think of it that way, you do resonate really well with Americana culture. Um, and that might be also a coincidence, but also a consequence of the varying similarities that we've highlighted, right? Between Belgium's position in the in Europe, and kind of what the United States is, right? when you used to play, you think there were less than 1,000 players in the whole country here. It might be a bit more now, but a very, very small community. So you're telling me, man, that's a weird flex for saying you're a unicorn in Belgium. I like it. I like it. Well, I guess it makes sense. I guess it would be a very poetic coincidence that both of us have eccentric combination of interest, even regardless of our like respective cultures, right? Like, for example, most common food I eat is not, it's in the statistical at it, like abnormal, right? Like when someone says, "Oh, what do you like enjoying to eat?" Eat. Well, I like my favorite like thing. Some of my favorite stuff, like it's a veggie that is not available in this on this continent readily. So yeah, us. I suppose unicorns and rare species gotta collect somehow. You know, the internet has that fantastic way of bringing them together. I suppose. Very, very small community indeed. Where else could you find a person who likes language learning while also diving in niche sports in their respective countries, while also representing a demographic that is also very small, right? Neat. Very neat. 1,000 players. Well, I consider this a privilege. I can't tell you if there are. I'm not even sure how many Asian bowlers back then. Like, what I mean is, I think if you take the world's population of bowlers, it might not even make up that many Asians. Or bowling. Yeah, I chose bowling. So, fun fact, referees are actually very hard to find. I can imagine. So you actually had a bunch of Americans who took on the role. Oh, that's cute. Ah, people who worked in military bases. Ah, okay. That totally checks out. Bring a slice of Americana to um because of like convenience by coincidence, right? Neat. Uh, okay. That is fun. Now I'm curious what other uh this would be a little biased because I don't know a lot about Belgian things. The closest thing, okay. Gecko. Gecko, you're gonna have to excuse me, but I'm gonna try to scrounge up any type of Belgian related thing, right? And the only thing I can think of right now is Belgian waffles. And I'm not even sure they're Belgian. Largely, a lot of times, American adopted cuisine and trending cuisine is a Americanization of that. So it may not necessarily reflect what is there, largely because of the whole Americana thing. So, but I do quite enjoy Belgian waffles as opposed to like any old waffles, like Americana waffles. So there's that. Belgian chocolate. I'm not cultured enough to understand what makes Belgian chocolate Belgian, but there's that too. That's all I got. I'm not entirely sure if I coincidentally am ignorant to certain Belgian traditions that made their way stateside that I like, but am unaware that they were Belgian of origin. So I'm not entirely sure if I know anything off the top of my head. In order to reciprocate the relations that we have right now with your example. Sports? No way. I have no idea. I don't know about sports. Not enough. Waffles and chocolate are too strong represented. You add beer as well. If I had a Belgian beer, do you know of any particular beer that is trendy stateside that gets exported to the United States often? Belgian beer. There's obviously, it's a low percentage. I used to hang out in social drink, but I don't do it as of late, or from these, as one grows older in the United States, actually drinking fades a lot more as one grows older, actually because of health concerns and whatnot, but not in the sake of like you can't drink beer recreationally. Oftentimes excessive drinking during youth led to that perception that one would decrease. I almost habitually 100% social drink. So the only opportunities when I sample or try to experience like alcoholic beverages and whatnot are typically in the context of social drinking, which hasn't happened for a while. That's COVID. Hitobito. Hitobito, I guess people. In sports, Belgium had a very strong presence in female tennis for a few years. Not as much now. You have a few top cyclists. Female. Unfortunately, I don't follow the WTA as close as the ATP. And then cycling, no. Cycling is a wash for me as well. We had a good few years in soccer. Oh, yes. I am familiar with the times when Belgian soccer was doing well. I am with that though. I did see a couple of them. Largely because, Germany is all up with their soccer things, but when hear me out. It's a twisted way of knowing, but Belgium and Germany, the flags, a lot of times when you're watching soccer, you also watch stat screens and you watch flags, right? Whenever I look at, oh yeah, Germany's all about their soccer, like their football, their soccer all the time. But whenever you see the Belgian flag next to them, like doing well as like that's kind of how I like acutely knew that Belgium was doing well some of the few years, because you don't often see those two flags in the same discussion. So whenever I'm looking like stats and up to the World Cup, like the group stages and whatnot, it's like, oh hey, look, Belgium's doing really well. And then oftentimes when I see Germany, like, oh yeah, Germany's doing pretty well. I wonder how Belgium is doing. Largely because when I see the German flag, I also think of the Belgian flag as well. It's a really oddball, acute example, but we're language learning, so You kind of associate things based on differences and compare and contrast. Yeah, they were top 5. Yeah, I remember. Disproportionate country size. It was kind of reminds me of the upset that Japan had, right? A couple of times Japan upset had like underdog wins, and that's also that similar case where you have like a disproportionately smaller eligibility of players. Let's not talk about. Let's not. This is where an American would come in, like, but the American men's soccer team, though, you know, a little lukewarm. That's usually it. Eventually, an American would pop in and say, "Well, let's not start talking about the American men's soccer team." But and largely because the female, right, the women's the women's American soccer team had quite a run, and I think it's still pretty good. I think, right? This might be out of date. I think the last time was that I thought about it was maybe 3 years ago. Probably even before COVID. That's a long. Wow, it's been that long. Anyways, yeah. Fun fact, if you're into flags, the Belgian flag is not just a vertical Belgian flag. The color order is different. Yeah, the color order is different. Mm-hmm. Yep. When I was younger, I used to play Geo Challenge. So you get very accustomed to the flags, and you match the flags based on the silhouette of the country. And then Geo Challenge also has what is now Geo Guesser, in a different way. But the rudimentary Geo Challenge back in the day had also landmarks. So you put a pin on landmarks, right? Like particular places like Mount Everest, Alps, Ulam Lapore, right? The Taj Mahal and stuff. So back in the high school days, that's how I occupy my time. And you just look at flags, match them with the silhouette, that what it would look like on a flat world map, right? Yeah, fun fact. Loved Geo Challenge. Indeed. There are also flags with what looks like similar colors, but they're actually different shades of the same color. And that kind of goes back to the whole my interest in digital artwork recently. I took a little closer look at some of the flags, and turns out they were different colors. Like one might look like green, but if you look closely, it's a different shade of green, like a really subtly different shade of green. Especially Scandinavian flags. Those are pretty. There's a fun little like relationship between the Scandinavian flags. You must say you don't really know what Belgian beers you can find in the US, unfortunately. I think the Belgian style of beer is usually reserved to connoisseurs. They're usually pretty strong. I see. Yeah, there was a time drafts or boards or flights. I forgot what they're called. I think they're called flights, right? Or a board. There was a time when I hung out with people, and the thing I would do, largely because the United States likes experimenting, so there's a lot of microbrews, right? People brew their own beer. Whether they're good or not, that's sure. That's fine. The idea is experimentation. So you would get like a flight. I think they're called flights at those places, where you would have like 6 glasses, right? 6 glasses, and they would be they're a little bit too generous. They're a little bit more generous than a shot glass, but personally I wouldn't mind. Like I like the fun thing about that experience is, if you go to like a local place, that the people would try to explain what went into creating each of those things, and then I like to like taste it according to how they describe it, right? So it's more like a from a culinary curiosity, and the taste and the floral notes and stuff. So kind of like your wine tasting, which I've only been to like 1 or 2 wine tasting too, which is a thing that people do as well when they have the privilege, right? Connoisseurs. So there were wine tasting things. I like correlating how wine and stuff is described to my sensation of the product, right? And of course, wine and beer are acquired taste. So I can't really say from an experience standpoint that I actually enjoyed, and or like the taste of it is gonna be very different from me. But I enjoy the academic curiosity, right? They're like, oh, this tastes bitter than this one, and it's usually bitter because I'm not tolerant to it as well. The whole acquired taste thing eludes me largely because I'm more of a dilettante in alcoholic beverages than someone who consistently drink alcohol and have that acquired taste. Coffee is the same. I go around, like if someone goes to a coffee shop, right, or a local coffee shop, and they have this specialty things, like give me that specialty things, and then describe to me what goes into making this coffee brew different than the other ones. And of course, coffee tastes extremely bitter. I can do somersaults and like join an X game or something, or do a mile sprint by the time I have that coffee. But generally speaking, it's an interesting experience. I do not kid when I get the shakes from consuming coffee nowadays. However, I like partaking in it. And of course, you say the overall stance on alcoholic beverages is one of the biggest cultural differences in the US versus Europe. Probably. Yeah, probably. I agree. And then, like, much like things of taste, right? Of taste, they're culturally within their own preferences, right? You know what they say? Customer is always right in the matter of taste. Did you ever hear that idiom? I'm not sure if that's that ever is a very widely accepted European idiom, but the contracted and misunderstood idiom, the customer is always right, or any version of that, like the customer is king. That's often referring to in the area of taste. So in this example, like when someone says, "Oh yeah, this beer is the best," it's like the customer is always right in the matter of taste. So if you're in the United States, the Americans prefer something, and then if you're in Europe, right? It's kind of, I always find it funny when it's like the United States and Europe, the contrast between referring to the United States and then the contrast between referring to Europe. And I feel it's more similar than it is not when making the contrast. Like some people, right? Lots of the ruffle feathers or pedantic technicalities would suggest, well, United States is a country. Europe is not a country. You know, that kind of thing. But then you think about, so how much do you know about the United States? Because that comment, you would think, well, if you had to gamble, from which perspective was that comment being made? It's usually from someone outside the United States, right? So the customer is always right mindset is certainly a thing here, although it is usually considered a principle imported from, okay, and not everyone has abided by it. Okay. And hear me out. That idiom has since changed, and it has lost its most nuanced point. And I still remember it to this day. Like when I first learned that idiom, it was from a Chinese perspective. It was from my parents' perspective. The customer is always right in the matter of taste, not like behavior, etiquette, cost, value, how to make things, how to operate a restaurant. The customer is always right in the matter of taste. As in, if the customer does not like your food, it is their opinion that is king about the taste, or like the style, the satisfaction, because it's their satisfaction that gives you patronage, right? Not how a customer dictates how your business should be operated, because they don't operate that business. They don't have the knowledge or experience of, oh yeah, this is too expensive, so you should make it cheaper. Meanwhile, the restaurant is like, we're making $- on this, right? And that was the original. That was kind of the original nuance. The idea is the customer is always right because it's their opinion that matters to your business. The opinion of taste, all the subjectivity of the customer is right. If the customer thinks this is too sweet, then you want to pay attention to that because you adjust your food to the taste of your local customers, right? And that got lost somewhere in translation for a while, because then it became the customer's always right, so they can like kick your door open, complain about how you run a business, tell you what your budget's like without any knowledge of what your budget's like, how you should treat people, etc. That's usually not in that idiom. It's usually, if the customer is happy, you do everything to make the customer happy in the sense of taste, not in the sense of objectivity. That's one of those things that the internet has kind of changed and flipped. Now, I'm not saying it means that now. I don't think it means that now. Most people say the customer is always right. That's like influencer culture and internet culture. When a customer is upset in how expensive the food is, the customer is always right. No, that is not a matter of taste. That often is far more objective than it is a matter of taste. As in, if you want this restaurant to sell you food at a loss, that is not a matter of taste, because you don't know how much that costs. You could assume and presume, but you don't operate a restaurant. You don't know how much things cost. Like, for example, tipping. Tipping is another thing. We mentioned this earlier, right? The other day, tipping, the customs of tipping and the customs of not tipping. How do you know if tipping makes the food more expensive or less expensive? The customer does not know how much those people are being paid, like exactly how much those people are being paid, how much that cuts into the cost of the meal, and how that factors. And if you're not willing to pay that, that is a different story. That is your taste in evaluating how much you are willing to pay, but not how much the business should make other people pay. That's kind of like a really fun little talk about empathy, I guess, and overstretching one's own expertise. I really like, this is a linguist thing, by the way. Like the people who like language learning, that they like talking about old idioms or idioms that have lost their meaning but has changed. Okay, not lost, but changed their meaning. Like what was the most recent one that I saw? This is one of the things I wanted to talk about. To pull one up by their bootstraps. So just imagine yourself looking at your boots and you're trying to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. It used to mean that's impossible to do. Like, you can't pull someone up by their bootstraps. So it's like a inherently impossible task. Like it's really hard. Don't bother with it. Nowadays, pulling up by the bootstraps, I don't use this idiom, so I just thought it was interesting. I wasn't aware of this idiom. But when you pull up by the bootstraps, it means it's hard, but you can get it done. Like it became nearly the opposite meaning of what it was originally. So in the sake of the customer is always right, that almost nearly flipped to opposite of its intent as well, which is crazy, right? You gotta love natural language. Natural languages is can't get ready. Be ready for the changes that happen with use. Anyways, that's all I got. Is this writing? This is writing, yeah. Okay. Was this a special exception? No. Wide. It's spread out. Oh. It's spread out. Yeah, that doesn't sound right. So it's definitely something else. Oh, no, wait. I think no. I think this is fine because Hiro is still kunyomi, right? Yeah, it's still kunyomi. Just kidding. Okay. Crises averted. That's actually an acquired WaniKani strategy. I wouldn't have been as confident if WaniKani didn't turn me on to applying rules of onyomi and kunyomi, which is what I appreciate about what they're doing here. And it's WaniKani specific for me. The whole idea of like, you could reasonably say it's this, largely because of onyomi and kunyomi division. And that's what I've invested most of my time lately. Itachi. I have more time. I have a more difficult time typing out the numbers with like the THs and stuff than the Japanese counterpart. I don't usually type out seventh day. Do they take 7 with a TH? Like this? I don't want to try right now. Try later. The diphthongs? Yeah, the diphthongs. As well. Oh, here's a fun one about Chinese. That's one of the content creators that like linguistics. The yesterday I made a comment about R, right? Like the like a beggar, right? Beggar, or oh, dagger. Wait, is it an E or an A? Yeah, it's an E, right? So the my phone listens to me all the time. So there was a clip that showed talking about how rare this is in English. Apparently, according to this guy, I'm taking the guy's word for it because I like statistics, but I don't like statistics that much. But apparently, in linguistics, if you collectively categorize the sound, this particular sound, and I know, Maro, you're familiar with IPA. Apparently, it accounts for less than 1% of like existing language sounds. And funny enough, coincidentally, this R and is common in English. And we're gonna say a lot of northern Chinese. So funny enough, the thing, yeah, obviously this was relevant to my phone hearing me talk about dagger the other day, but and I noticed this a lot in northern Chinese accents with the ing of things like ni sure, right? Ni sure, ni lots of like little here and there, just adding everywhere, and that's so funny. And I didn't know how rare it was either. Apparently, this is rarer than like the guy made some sounds that I know where I can think of examples of where the clicking noise comes from. So apparently, this is even rarer than that. That's shocking to me. That's really like neat, very neat. And I always thought this was a funny thing because my parents speak Chinese, right? Or since I've grown up, I've listened to various accents and whatnot. And whenever it comes to the thing, I'm like, is it a weird coincidence that the two languages that I'm like two regionally sounds that I have this particular sound, but not anywhere else? And the guy at the end, the punchline was, yes, it is a coincidence. And it's so funny. Like coincident, like these are not related to each other. They are coincidental. That the like in jar, nar, idar, right? That kind of thing, and beggar, dagger, it's kind of, I thought it was pretty funny. Like, oh yeah, it's so neat. It's the algorithm. It's the algo pandering to me because of my topics that I usually listen to and watch. The own-kun rules are great indeed, and I like how WaniKani explains them. Of course, sometimes the exception still tricks us. Of course, exceptions are exceptions, right? Of any language that allows you to condition you to retain exceptions, it might as well be in English. It might as well be English, right? Were you here when I made that joke? Yeah, the whole French thing, or it might as well be Chinese. Yeah, that was you, Gecko. You actually started with the whole it might as well be like it might as well be Chinese kind of thing. Hey, if we're talking about exceptions and needing to normalize getting tricked by exceptions, it might as well be English. But you can still make a good guess 80% of the time, which is the point. Yeah. On the flip side, English is gonna slap you in the face and say like, get used to it. Like, oh, I genuinely want to interact with other people who are learning English much later in life. Like, you write this, it has a diphthong, right? So go at it. Which generalization or rule is going to help you with the pronunciation of this without the use of IPA? I'm like, well, gee, sometimes I'm not even so sure about I'm not so sure myself nowadays because there's a chance this is pronounced multiple ways. Like, I don't know. I know how Americans might pronounce this, but it's not wholly chance that there's a chance this might be pronounced like more than one way now, largely because of the number of users. Like yesterday we were talking about since and sense, right? And I even misspelled since yesterday. I spelled it with an S. So that's what do you do? What do you do? Americans around me say sense for both of these. So I don't know. I think my favorite one is, or the one that I tend to emphasize a lot is this. Loud is like loud, I guess. Yeah. Yeah. Ooh, I don't even know how you put in those characters that you have, Marl. Like, I don't even know how you input those characters. Like this. I actually differentiate between this one and these two. This is there. And this is there. There, there, there. It's longer. There. There. There, there, there. They're coming there. Or they're going there. They're going there. So while they use the same sound, my there is longer than there. But technically all of these are the same. Or you just copy and paste, nothing. Oh, okay. I didn't know of, you've so used to the IPA, like there might be like an input version of IPA. You think they're all homophones? I see. Or here, I use this example a lot because these are common words. These are common words. So this is build, right? I'm gonna say it the same way. So build, but I get build to build something, build, build. So the mora is longer on build versus build. I didn't do this intentionally. This happened before Japanese, but now that I am learning Japanese, I notice these things about my tendencies. I notice that my mora changes when it comes to specific English words. Tonality is also another one. Tonality is built into English as well. And actually, English speakers might actually do this, but they don't really relate it to tonality. Like review and review. So it's a mix, right? Because English is stress accent, so you mix a lot of things. There's tonality changes, pitch changes, and also mora changes simultaneously, and volume changes. But the volume change, even if you normalize the volume change, you can differentiate between review and review. So I review a review. Or you could say, I review a review. Functionally, you're not gonna mess it up. It's not going to like affect the meaning in the context of a sentence, much like pitch accent in Japanese. It might not, right? However, it's going to sound a little weird to certain people. So I review a review. Review is the noun. Review is the verb. So often I review videos and I write reviews of videos. Hence the no rules. I mean, these aren't rules, right? So there's no rules about this. But in English, when someone listens, they can feel it. They can feel the difference. And that's pretty funny. Yesterday, I think Blair said sociopathy. Sociopathy. Blair said that she hasn't heard anyone who says sociopathy before. However, she also understands that it sounds right, like it sounds nice compared to sociopathy. See, I can't even say it the other way. Sociopathy. Yeah, sociopathy. When you say sociopathy, at least to me, when I hear sociopathy, that sounds weird, but it might not sound weird to someone who speaks this word that way, but it doesn't affect the meaning of it. And yet it's functionally weird and or not. I say sociopathy. In fact, it takes me a couple of tries to say sociopathy, right? Sociopathy versus sociopathy. Largely due to in science, right? When you're in a scientific field, you have a lot of this structure of this word. Sociopathy, pathology. Pathology is another one. Pathology. As opposed to pathology. I think. Yeah, pathology. Pathology, like biology. I guess if you use the word frequently, you would notice the weirdness. I don't find it weird because I never use it. Yeah, that too. You sometimes, reread and listen to T.S. Watt's pronunciation poem, which is a fun exercise. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Ooh, I don't know it, and that sounds like something I want to do this week. Pronunciation poem. Okay, I got something to read today, or maybe I should read a little bit. Am I supposed to just read it? Here is a silly poem about how difficult English pronunciation can be to get you through the day with a smile on your face. You might need help getting your tongue back in your mouth at the end. Okay, let me read a few of the lines, okay? I take it you already know of touch and what is that word? And cough and dough. Oh, is it of touch and bow and cough and dough? Others may stumble, but not you, on what the heck is hiccough? Oh no! Okay. You're right. I see what they're doing. Yes. Is that hiccough? Or hicco? Hiccough? Thorough. Laugh and... All right, I would highly recommend this to anyone, honestly. Yeah, that's a good one. Okay, so maybe that's through. Yeah. Through. Yes, through. Well done. And now you wish, perhaps, to listen of less familiar traps. Beware of herd and a dreadful word that looks like beard and sounds like bird. And dead is said like bed and not bead, and goodness sake, don't call it deed. Watch out for meat and great, dang it, and great and threats. They rhyme with sweet and straight and depth. A moth is not the moth in mother, nor both in bother, broth in brother. Oh my gosh, that's pretty sweet. And there is not a match for there, not dear, and fear for bear and pear. And those and there's dose and rose and lose. Just look them up and goose and choose. And cook and work and card and ward. Ward and font and front and word and sword. Oh yeah. Yeah. I think in this long run, if you're hearing it, it's far more processable than trying to read it. Right? Like when I hear myself saying the phrases gecko and they make sense. But when you're trying to read the words, it's like making you secondhand choose the different diphthongs and the different vowel sounds. And that's kind of neat. That's a really interesting this is a good exercise. I'll have to read this again next. Oh, we're almost at the end actually. And cork and work and card and ward and front and font and front and word and sword and do and go and thwart and cart. Come, come, I've hardly made a start. A dreadful language, man alive. I'd master it when I was 5. Oh, that's kind of cute. Oh, this is so cute. 1954? Really? 1954. This is such a fun little poem. Thank you for the share, Gecko. That's such a neat one. I was trying to be like more elegant, but it probably requires a little bit more reading. But I really like it. 1954. A visionary. T.S. Watt was a visionary. Neat. I think the nice one is read and read, right? Read and read is malicious. Led and lead is malicious as well, right? What else we got? Like I think these ones are a little like I think this one is pretty common, right? It's a common word, and this one's a mean one. Read and read. Read and read, like great. It feels, you know what read and read reminds me of? Wait, is there something analogous? I'll have to think about it. I feel like I can come up with an example of the maliciousness of read and read. Alright, cool. Homographs. There's one I like from the Big Bang Theory. Oh, Polish and Polish. Oh yeah, that's right. Polish and Polish. Polish. Oh my gosh. Polish and Polish. Polish and Polish. That's a good one. Oh wait, did I know you like did I ever mention Big Bang Theory when you were around? Maro? I really like Big Bang Theory. That was when I was talking about like Star Trek and stuff. The little things that come up. Okay. Yeah. Speaking of which, Gecko and I recently talked about flags, the Belgian flag and the German flag, Gecko. It's relevant to Big Bang Theory because Sheldon likes flags. It's not a coincidence. I'm telling you, these things are not a coincidence. I think there are behavioral selective preferences when it comes to like observations. Fun with flags is not a coincidence. And hear me out. Here's another fun fact. Some fun facts about Big Bang Theory and my life. I was the Asian guy in the group. And I did the Asian things in the group. But all of us still went to comic book stores. I'm just saying. Like we did. We went to comic book stores. And yeah, you kind of get into those discussions. No, I'm obviously, this is confirmation bias, but those are some fun facts that coincidentally, I I'm not saying it's not a coincidence. It's probably a coincidence. Um, but yeah, those things they do come up. Interestingly enough, obviously all the characters in Big Bang Theory are caricatures of a whole, so you can kind of imagine all three of all of the characters slammed together, and then those activities still persist, right? Being very observant, comparing things and whatnot, and just so happens flags are a very, very excellent way of doing that. And then video games, yeah, video games. Yes, fun with flags. I would really, I bet someone, is there anyone out there that makes content about fun with flags? I guess straight up, I've seen a couple language channels, like culture language channels that use like flags and talk about flags, but not in like a referential to Big Bang Theory. I did see a couple of the flag stuff. I really like that I guess he's an Icelandic person who may or may not be residing in Iceland. I like when he talks about the Norwegian, like or like the Scandinavian culture. So I watch a lot regarding that, and flags. The topic of flags come up quite a bit when comparing them, and you always see the flags because in those types of content they would have the country's flag that they're trying to like a contrast, compare and contrast. Like, in Japan they do this, in in Malaysia they do this, and then you would see the flags. So you kind of get really into recognizing flags, like, oh okay, like that's the flag that it became basically a kanji, right? Flag pictures nowadays, at least to someone who constantly consumes multicultural content, flags become basically kanji. Like, it's almost instantaneous. It's like, oh okay, we're talking about that country now. Oh okay, we're talking about that country now. Fun, very fun. uh did they take this book for this or notebook? Ah, all right. I'm so energized now. Okay. Uh, uh, yeah. Okay. This one. They changed this. Yeah. MAKU. Uh. Yeah, I like this. This mnemonic, I keep in my heart. This mnemonic is great. On the seventh day, someone asks you, "Do you want to go out or something?" And it's like, "Nah, no car, nah, no car." I think this mnemonic, like, I really get behind this. Nah, no car. When I say Nanoka in my head, all I think about is nah, no car. And I don't even speak British English, Nah, no car. Flags and all sorts of symbols is semiotics, yeah, a subfield of linguistics, and I like memorizing all of those stuffs. Yeah, I like semiotics. Semiotics is it's so useful. Like it kind of provides a functionality. Semiotics provide a functionality that is ingrained nowadays in online conversations as well, because you can argue in a way. I'm not sure. Do linguistics still also include semiotics as emotes? Do emotes fall under the category of semiotics? I feel like it's like semiotics adjacent, at least minimally now. So on the internet, if one doesn't appreciate semiotics in the current age, it'd be pretty shocking, especially the current age of the internet, where you see smileys and like even you would think so, yeah. So that's kind of how I think it's blending really are. Like semiotics go, they have such general purpose nowadays. Like even obscure semiotics, like I don't know, a skull face, right? You would think like a skull face, that could be misconstrued. And nowadays, like I don't even bat an eyelash on it. It's like, oh, okay, it doesn't mean what you think it means, but it kind of evolves too, and you just get used to it. It's quite startling. I think the other thing that is very interesting lately that I've been looking at was the variances in sign language. The variances in sign language, right? There are different types of sign language because of regional uses and stuff, and that's kind of really neat too. I don't know how to sign. Maybe like some I can see and recognize a couple of the common phrases, largely because I possibly have seen them enough times online, but I wouldn't know how to go about doing them, right? Something like this, right? That's about as detailed as it can get, right? But yeah, different regional variations in sign language. Okay. Wait. Ah! Wait. Oh, whoops. I read. Sorry, I read the I read the kanji incorrectly. Still thinking about the sign language thing. Okay. It's fine. We're fine. I don't know why, but I'm not into sign language that much, but they're very important, I guess. I don't have a large investment as well, largely because I don't have anyone around me that without sounding too pragmatic, generally speaking, it has to be important to someone that have shared time with me or wanted to share time with me in order for me to invest. So unfortunately, this medium, right, this type of medium, I did have an occasional time that someone did interact with me who's deaf, right, who's deaf, and they appreciated that I use closed captions, right? They appreciate that I use closed captions, and that's how I met the person. I originally had automatic CC for the Twitch side of things. Nowadays, obviously, I think the Twitch side of things still don't have simultaneous transcription, but on the YouTube side of things, they're all closed captioned. So even with or without, and there's an option for that. And I did meet that one time. I was playing video games, right? I was doing Neverwinter streams. And I did meet someone who was deaf. However, like the sign language would be one direction, right? It would be unidirectional, much like learning Japanese and learning Chinese. I can't. It's an asymmetry. So sign language itself also ends up being like speaking Japanese and speaking Chinese, right? The best I can do is to incentivize myself, and it can be tough when no one around you have a use for it, right? And the best I can do is encourage myself to do that. So that's where our next stage of Japanese and Chinese. Obviously, I don't have to motivate myself for Chinese because my parents, I can use it functionally with my parents. And in Spanish, interestingly enough, not particularly anymore, but we'll see. Japanese has a different use now, largely in the sense of typing, and there are discords that are in Japanese, and there are discords of Japanese of video games that happen to be dominant in Japanese. So that's how I'm like sort of using it in a typing sense, but it hasn't been speaking. And I think sign language has that element too, where how do I do it in an asymmetrical manner, right? And I don't think I have anyone, by coincidence, I don't think I have anyone around me that is hearing impaired to that extent. Yeah. You're gonna go to bed, Gecko? Yeah, thanks once more. You too. It's always been a pleasure to keep in touch. Yeah, quite a few subjects once again. You know me, we gotta bring in more topics each day. One day we can talk about underwater basket weaving. By that, I mean I know nothing about underwater basket weaving. It used to be my default. I used to tell people that I could do that. Actually, I can't. I don't think I've ever weaved anything in my life so far, yet. Maybe we could maybe we could all pick up underwater basket weaving sometime. I don't even know if that's a thing. Let me see. Underwater basket weaving. Oh yeah, it's a thing. Oh, I mean, why am I not surprised? Oh, you have to literally be underwater. I thought you're in a bucket. Oh no, yeah, here it is. You do it in a bucket. Some people do it underwater, but that's kind of a little insane. I'm kidding. Don't. I'm kidding. Good night. Good night, Gecko. Oyasumi nasai. Okay. Let's complete our stuff. Wait. How did this work? It was like look at narwhals on the right side or something. I don't remember it anymore. We don't need these mnemonics anymore, so okay. Oh, dude, was this different too? No, it went straight. Let's go. Taco field. Actually, this is kind of helpful. Returning mnemonics that overlap with new mnemonics that use the same like reads. That's kind of helpful. Like rice patty now reminds me of taco leader. Other. Yeah. Right? Yeah. That's it. That's all she wrote. All right, let's go over this. Yeah, taco. Taco leader. This one. The other leader. Leader of the tacos. We're not this is not as messy as usually anything after like the second level up day, like the following level up day is okay. Oh, this keeps track of where the extra set. Okay. So, I guess we'll find out tomorrow. Oh, tomorrow's the big day, right? Oh, it could be the following day. 50. It's either tomorrow or Monday is going to be the level up day. I don't know how long these are going to refresh. So it's either tomorrow. We're going to try to do it slightly different. You haven't watched my introduction for WaniKani. So do you have a subscription? Yes, it is a life subscription. Yes. The introduction did explain my motivations for both WaniKani and Hanzahiro. The short term, the hot take. What's a quick way to summarize why I bought a life subscription? So I wanted a 2025 project. And for most of 2024, people brought up WaniKani. And the reason why I bought WaniKani is 9 out of the actually literal 10 people that I've encountered during my language learning journey for Japanese had positive things to say about it. And what I mean by 9 out of 10, I mean people who stayed and talked about it to some extent. They're no longer here. A lot of them are no longer here. However, they stayed long enough for me to understand what type of individual, like what type of thinking process that they have, and they are usually resoundingly positive. So when I was looking, oftentimes when I think about projects, I like to invest forward. And the long story short is usually I think about maybe they have discounts. So I knew already at the end of 2024 there was a chance at a discount of lifetime investment. When it comes to budgeting and investing, I usually have a lot of factors, but generally speaking, it deals with the aspect of community, right? I like to know the devs and the communities that surround the devs, and it was very positive. So then I'm like, yeah, 200 USDs, it's a great investment forward. That's kind of my thought. This is a really long hot take. It took me like 4 or 5 hours to talk about actually I might have kept it down below 3 hours to talk about the decision making when it comes to these things. And then Hanzahiro had something a bit different because dealing with structure, and when I do like project testing and whatnot, or like trying to evaluate things, I often like to compare it with something, have a relative, try to expand. So I like to stagger and ladder things together. So then Hanzahiro, by chance, also Hanzahiro is leading into his post second year, and by coincidence, they instituted a lifetime subscription. The first 2 years, Kevin was uncomfortable in offering a lifetime subscription because they didn't reach a state in which it is a complete product yet. So offering a lifetime license would be potentially disingenuous in the sense that there's no guarantee that the product will reach that state. So when it reached a certain state, by happens, it was last October 2024. Actually, maybe October, November. So then at that discount, that original introduction discount, I also bought a lifetime subscription to Hanzahiro. And this is my pledge for 2025. If not, also 2026. So I put my faith in people. Much like how I approach conversations. It is for you to do. So do with as please. Obviously, in this case we're talking about literal dollars, but literal dollars, in my opinion, pales in comparison to my happy dollars. My figurative faith and trust in someone is why I stream and talk about them. I think my words and my use and my time is worth far more than the dollars that they represent. So, a slight summary of that stuff. And I wanted to dispel like why other reasons that people might consider these things are not necessarily relevant to me, right? Like, I didn't buy WaniKani expecting that it would make me fluent or dramatically elevate my Japanese progress. I'm buying WaniKani for a lot of different reasons, but most of them are dealing with vicarious understanding, teaching instructions, and methods, right? I can be very, very happy with like a middle school or a high school level of overall Japanese proficiency. The idea is I want to be useful in the sense of being experienced in getting people interested and approaching language learning so that they can go on and do their things. I'm a person who has no problems teaching or wanting to teach like middle school biology or high school biology or something. Just because I have a PhD in biology, it's not beneath me to do those. It brings me a lot of reward. So that's kind of a little thing that fed into the whole WaniKani and Hanzahiro. So I have 2 lifetime subscriptions. And whether if it suddenly closed down, if WaniKani suddenly closed down and Hanzahiro suddenly closed down, I hope they do something with the money, right? That's kind of the idea. I went into a little bit talk about how decisions are made in terms of money. Usually I purchase things I make faith purchases when it comes to subscription-based things, as opposed to paying for future expectations. I forgot what that's called. There's a word for it, where you're buying something on the hopes that you can get the value out of it. And that can work for a lot of people. It doesn't work for me. So it's both it's double-edged. When you buy something, you expect to try to get the value out of it, and it might not happen, and then it becomes disappointing, right? Or you bought something in anticipation of promises that were to come, and or you promised yourself to make something useful, like buying a bunch of dumbbells, expecting to become fit from using the dumbbells, but you ended up not using the dumbbells, right? That's relying on you. For me, in these cases, I buy on it knowing that the worst thing that could happen is I quit tomorrow, because I bought it as a privilege of my own money. Now, the downside is that also means buying it and how much it costs doesn't necessarily influence me in trying to get my most like money out of it. Like if I spend $200, I'm not aiming to get $200 worth of value from it. I know that the $200 is going to supporting a product that many people have spoken fondly of or have encouraged them to do something. And I like supporting creators that do that. And it's the same thing for Duolingo, by the way. This also lined up to my pledge to Duolingo. I have the whole last year, I didn't use anything. But I also know now, by coincidence, on top of that, Duolingo has a year discount. So I also invested, I think it was $70. $70 USD for a year of Duolingo Super. And in Duolingo's thing is straightforward. I spent 1 year with Duolingo. I learned quite a lot of things. In contrast to how other people expect that they are using a free product and expect that they're investing something, right? Even in the sense of dollars, it was zero. I spent zero. So it was a pleasant surprise. So I also bought a year of Duolingo. actually, the alternative I was going to do is I was going to buy something from the Duolingo store. So I'm going to buy probably a stuffed Duo and a stuffed Falstaff from their store as like a memorabilia somewhere in the background. It'll pop up at some point. I enjoy the idea that if it meant obviously you would need a lot of people like me in order to keep a lot of things like Duolingo even having less ads, for example, or less pressure to provide subscriptions, right? So the CEO once said this very conservatively. He's like, yeah, it's kind of hard to avoid this, but it's people who have money that is keeping the product afloat, not necessarily the people that are complaining about having a free product that they're using and expecting something in return. So oftentimes when people talk about like the money side of things, actually Duolingo doesn't target people who are unwilling to pay. They more target people who are willing to pay. And for me, that's kind of, I fall in the latter category. I like educational products, whether it means it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes, it's distracting people from doom scrolling. And that's fantastic. I think the most resonating comment that the CEO in an interview said multiple times is that they are competing with TikTok. And I totally get it. Especially that one recent time when TikTok got banned, quote unquote banned. And then suddenly there's a surge in Duolingo traffic. That is what really recently topically really hit home. Like, yes, that is exactly what I like to see if I'm going to invest in a product that is trying to make learning in any way possible far more accessible. Then I don't know what it is about TikTok, but I people link me TikToks, but I don't usually use TikToks. Um Hey, Procall. Did you manage to get back all right? Did you already return home? How was your day? TikTok does have a STEM section where it only shows STEM related videos, which is about learning. Yes. And that's kind of nice. However, it also doesn't necessarily mean the STEM section is filled with appropriate information. If you know what I mean. It is nice to hear that they do have one. I'm pretty sure I got linked a couple of those. And those also get duplicated and or are also posted on YouTube Shorts. Like I look at YouTube Shorts too, which are repost of TikToks sometimes or the other way around. But yeah, there is also STEM sections that I've seen. The one concerning thing I have about TikTok is that the STEM section is also filled with misinformation as well. And the misinformation might not be intentional as well because there's not enough time in the format to provide disclaimers, right? Like, I'm not saying it's intentional misinformation. It might be misinformation. It looks like misinformation in the context of the short format, but since I don't know if there's a long format of it, it's difficult to know if that was the intent. Like, it might be, instead of saying misinformation, it might be incomplete information and or it is STEM material, but it's opinionated, and opinionated material might not necessarily be for learning. It's more for inspiration, right? Kind of like conventional wisdom. Conventional wisdom is there for inspiration, but it might not necessarily, and for learning purposes, but might not be necessarily accurate in the sense of what STEM is usually referring to. Like evidence-based, evidence-based messages. Yeah, you're back home? Nice. You ended up being a 7.5-hour trip due to delays, but got back. Was feeling very very comforted once you got home. I'm glad to hear that, Procol. Yeah, I imagine the extent of regulation for what's allowed in STEM section is just analyzing whether it's actually STEM related and not fact checking it. Yeah. So not that I'm saying there is a place in place for I like that idea. It's great that that's a thing on TikTok. The format can be very restrictive. I think the format is incredibly restrictive, so I'm biased, right? I'm very biased. I think it's very difficult to capture adequate, consistent concepts in like a short format. Like when you're doom scrolling, you can get bits and pieces. It's kind of like WaniKani, right? WaniKani, you get bits and pieces of the vocabulary, but when you're trying to piece it together, you have to see it pieced together, or you have to use it pieced together in order to see the application of it. And STEM often involves information, but an application of that information. And the format is largely temporally too short to apply that. Like there's no amount of WaniKani that could ever help me with contextualizing vocabulary, like outside of memorizing the vocabulary in isolation. And I feel that's the closest thing to TikTok as well when it comes to providing information. You have little bits and pieces. How you wield that and use that is going to be very tenuous, largely because the format will not likely have like, hey, here's a STEM series by this one creator, and it's like a sequence of small episodes put together, right? Also, like you could say about short formats could lead to simplification to such an extent that it's misleading. Yeah, and not intentionally misleading, obviously. It can end up misleading the person because the information is incomplete or it requires more elaboration. Yeah. So there's no malicious. I don't necessarily think people are inherently maliciously intended to do things. We have content creators, and they're of all ages, of all different types of professional backgrounds, and they have different criteria and standardization for what may be construed as potentially misleading or not, right? And we have to understand those limitations. Like YouTube shorts are notwithstanding, they are also that way. However, there is one asterisk on YouTube shorts. When you see a short on YouTube, you can click on the video that leads to the full video. So there's a lightly higher chance that when you click on a YouTube short, you can view the longer video. So it doesn't stop comments from saying, oh, this is wrong, this is wrong. And it's like, well, did you click on the video? Because the 30-minute video the short comes from is on that short. So you can click on the longer full example. It got to the point where even creators would say, hey, here's a link to the full video in the comment section. But then there was like a controversy with view farming and abuse. So they no longer allow links in the comments. So you had to go to the description and or the bottom of the YouTube short to click on the long format. So it's a work in progress. You do always wonder how far you can simplify information while it's still being considered true. Me too. Me too. I think there are brilliant people out there that are quite good at that and would still find it incredibly restrictive, like literally in this sense of time. Yeah, I would be surprised if it was malicious. Yeah, me too. I genuinely believe that it's largely due to the functionality of the business model and like the hyperactive nature of feedback that is we're in a golden age, sort of maybe a gilded age of how to maximize neuronal satisfaction, right? Neuronal satisfaction and behavioral satisfaction of human beings. Now, leveraging that requires a long time to adapt, like a much longer adaptation period. Like, how do we moderate Midas type of golden Yeah, so a Gilded Age. But the nice thing is, it's there now. So hopefully humans can adjust to it, right? Human society as a whole could adjust and leverage it. How do we balance the nearly gluttonous adaptation to the fury of dopamine, easy accessible neuronal dopamine, and how we moderate that so that we reach a balanced ground. For now, it's kind of like discovering sugar, right? Or discovering high fructose corn syrup. At least in an Americanized example, it's kind of like the invention of high fructose corn syrup. It ended up in everything. But now you're thinking, oh yeah, that led to soda and stuff. It's like, that's now finally moderating. Do you know how, thinking about the time frame that took before the idea of moderating high fructose corn syrup consumption in analogous to sugar. Now, there's a misconception that high fructose corn syrup is some sort of agent that is far more potent at creating a terrible disposition, obesity and diabetes, for example, but it's not necessarily that. And it's actually not even scientifically that. It's the accessibility of high fructose corn syrup. It is shelf stable, it's readily produced in mass quantities, and it is available in many products. So its moderation was uncontrolled. The consumption of high fructose corn syrup was uncontrolled, and it took quite some time before there was pushback in actively understanding to moderate the consumption, right? Much like many other inventions. The smartphone, for example, moderation of smartphone use is only recently being pushed back on, right? Because the convenience and the wild accessibility of smartphone is consuming a person's life due to the advent of its usage. What is another great example right now that's happening topically? AI generated content. Right? So when will ChatGPT be a potential unintentional but deleterious or possibly deficient way of communicating with other human beings, for example? LLMs are great to mirror that, and they're trying to make that, but is that consumption so spiraling out of control to the point that it's replacing human interaction? It takes a while to adjust, right? People don't talk like that yet. It's unprecedented. There are whole people, hear me, like, this is very real. There are people who are willing to talk about grief and trauma to an LLM over another human being, right? And you're hoping that that tool is able to mirror some sort of comfort and dynamics of a human being, right? So there is still like moderation for every advancement, much like sugar in the form of high fructose corn syrup. Sweeteners, alternative sweeteners, aspartame, right? Aspartame, and now we have like xylitol, erythritol, and even like stevia, like things extracted from plants and whatnot. So humans take a little bit adaptation to crazy wild inventions, especially leaps forward in inventions. And I feel TikTok and our like app design and stuff is part of the equation. Like, how much of WaniKani is going to make you addicted to SRS or highly dependent on SRS over reading a book, right? Reading a book, talking to other people and making mistakes and bumbling with different languages. Those are the things that are getting substituted in high quantities. Efficiency is replacing a lot of things, but that doesn't mean they're going to disappear. I think it requires time of reflection and moderation. Humans take time. It takes a while. Definitely much slower than technology. Yeah, I would be surprised, but when it's a public video, you would likely get the most interaction by assuming the viewer had no prior understanding on topic, leading to vast simplifications. Yes. Yeah, it's tricky to know how to deal with systems of reward like sugar, fats, dopamine, because we are no longer in an environment where those things are rare. Exactly. But useful, that urge for these things are no longer helpful due to availability. Yep, exactly. They no longer function in a way for moderation, right? For homeostasis, right? When you're upset, you seek something nice, right? Like, for example, procall your events from yesterday. I would probably throw cat videos at you or whatever you like to enjoy. Go doom scroll something. That would be a really fast way to try to counteract a very traumatic situation, right? That would be a very useful case of understanding how dopamine release and really quick satisfaction like eating ice cream after a very stressful day, those things are great in moderation, but they can also create addiction, right? Like alcohol, like real things like substance abuse. They are incredibly effective. Doom scrolling is incredibly effective at substituting other things. So hopefully, I like to believe that those who are more experienced, have greater wisdom because of age and time, are able to be compassionate enough to also enable younger and younger people to understand how to regulate and moderate things like excessive dependency on good feelings. I understand that sounds kind of hypocritical or maybe a little paradoxical or what I try to do, but what I mean is finding different sources that kind of balances the effort and the reward, right? Because free sugar, free dopamine, free lots of good things also comes with no strings attached, as in there one could end up normalizing not needing to be productive in any other way other than achieving an end result, which is more dopamine release. And that would be great if life was that simple, right? But functionality of a human being requires a lot of development of other skills that balances out when inevitably your biological organism that cannot sustain constant escalation of things. Your body is homeostatic by nature. This is a little bit of a stretch, but your body is homeostatic by nature, right? So if you're constantly throwing something at it for it to try to regulate its homeostatic balance, then at some point it will stop doing that. It will stop being able to do that. There's a cap on dopamine, sort of. There's diminished return on, excessive dopamine response, excessive sugar response, excessive fat consumption, it's homeostatic. It's kind of like those people nowadays. This is a wild, random YouTube clip that I saw, and it was a response of Hank Green to something else a lot of times. When things like or like a medical professional who's responding to something like detoxing, like the whole idea like, oh yeah, the toxins in your body can accumulate, so when they accumulate it becomes a critical mass. That's the level of thinking that leads to like constant dopamine release dependency, sugar and fat. Your body is homeostatic. It does not like that stuff. If that is true, you're doomed. You're really doomed. Your body is a steady state. Toxins don't accumulate like that. They cycle through your body. So like it's constantly being displaced as it's accumulating. So it's homeostatic. as opposed to like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna doom scroll for 3 hours and then that'll be fine. If I keep it at 3 hours, it's not gonna change or anything. It typically changes. Moderation is what keeps the consistency, not necessarily escalating use, right? Your body is trying to adapt to the excessive use of those things. It has natural checks and balances to make and dampen effects that are happening in excess. That is a compensatory response, not a like a beneficial or like a mechanical advantage. A lot of times when people think about it, there are examples of this, but it's at the expense of the body's utility. Like for example, running long distances. If you're an ultra marathon runner, the excessive need for performance is at the cost of the body's homeostatic properties. You are pushing your body past the limit and it's trying to adapt and tolerate it. It's not necessarily saying that you're not, potentially engaging in excess activity that won't cause your body harm. And that's kind of one of those things, not malicious, but also a very real human condition. Unregulated access to good stuff. That's too much of a good thing in more ways than one. Yeah, you think LLMs could be useful by mimicking certain human behaviors while potentially giving more comfort by the user knowing it won't have the risk of, talking with human-like judgment? Yes. And I think being mindful of moderation is important, as it should be a quick comforting thing and not falling into a hole of temporary unjustified comfort, but rather building a longer sustainable format to deal with stress and discomfort. And then it can be a horrible cycle of doing something for quick comfort, but then knowing there's a choice to get that quick comfort can lead to think of not using the comforting method as a bad thing rather than using it as a good extra. Yes, topping beyond the sufficiency, right? Like, I love playing this game. What's another hour? What's another 14 hours? You know what? What's another 72 hours? I can't get enough of this. What's another... Oh no, I have a problem. Right. And one thing I want to, like, I'm going to transition to Hanzahiro now. One thing I want to leave for this is on the internet, the algorithm and LLMs may not be able to process the biological limitations of what you can do, right? So when someone says, why not doom scroll a little bit more? There isn't anything on TikTok that's telling you have done this for 2 hours. Perhaps it may happen in the future. Like there might be moderation safeguards placed in because we're adapting as a society. But for now, there are no guardrails. There's no upper limits, no lower limits, no soft limits, no encouragement limits. Like, if you're going to listen to TikTok and you're going to doom scroll, there's nothing that's saying like, hey, you've done this for an hour. How about, I'm gonna do a meme. How about touch some grass just for a moment for like 5 minutes? I actually do this consistently after stream, right? I have to write and think a lot, but I do get up like every 30 minutes or so, walk around and do a different activity, like just pace around the room and whatnot. These things are habits that take more effort, like, right? It takes more effort, but if your body's not normalized to different types of source of effort, then it will naturally become incredibly dependent on escalating requirements of other things until you break, right? Until you reach a current point where there's no, that stimuli is no longer sufficient and you no longer have alternatives, or you feel like you have no longer alternatives. And that dependency is scary to me. where when moderations are not placed sufficiently quick, or like the response is not sufficiently quick, there are points of there are those critical points when they're reached. Oftentimes, in very unfortunate cases, it can be astronomically harder to like deviate from or alter or refrain, right? Habit formation is incredibly strong as time passes. And the less practice of forming new habits or tuning habits, the greater and greater the resistance to it will occur. So waiting till it becomes a problem is kind of probably the least opportune moment that one could exercise preventive measures or some sort of sustainable lifestyle. Sometimes I do earnestly believe it's better, it may be far more reasonable to experience things to a lesser degree than waiting till you experience it full stop. Like withdrawal symptoms, for example, withdrawal from dopamine. That withdrawal can hit you like a dump truck if your normal dose is like 6 hours of doom scrolling. And yeah, so the natural state is you hope that you didn't get to a point where you can't scale it back to 5 hours, to 4 hours, to 3 hours. And then you might even say, okay, I'll only doom scroll when I need to feel good, right? Then it could be like total of 3 hours, but separated throughout the day, and then you can like drop sometimes. That kind of thing can mitigate dependency, and hopefully that's the case. I can stop WaniKani. I'm kidding. I'm addicted to WaniKani. Sorry, that was lighthearted joke. Like I can drop WaniKani now if I want it, right? But I still really like it, and it does create learning potential and whatnot. So there is a thing to be said about when someone says, I can quit anytime. You know, the dangerous phrase of I can quit anytime. And I would love to hear what people think when they say that about the things they love most, right? Can you truly quit anytime? This is a more of a trust me bro situation. Like, can I quit Duolingo at any time? Well, I kind of did. It's still there, but you know, I can moderate my Duolingo use even after 300 days of like 8 hours of Duolingo. I could moderate it immediately because I intend to moderate it. I don't think doom scrolling is comes with awareness yet. Like there isn't anything. You know what would be interesting? Here's a great thought experiment. Maybe for a topic for another time. Here's a thought experiment. Make it incredibly visible on TikTok, somewhere on the interface, how long you've been on TikTok. You know? Like, I'm curious if an incredible, ever-present, visible reminder that's obligated, by the way, not optional. It starts a timer that's displayed. Like you can't remove it, you can't hide it. I mean, obviously people will work around it, but it would be really interesting as a thought experiment to like say, hey, we want to try something new. We want to try something new. Do you mind participating? Like incentivize it, even incentivize it, right? We will give you like, I don't know, 1 magical credit, like to post like a star or something on your profile or something, right? Something virtual to TikTok. If you want to participate in an experimental beta setting where we're trying to promote healthy quality and sustainability and awareness of TikTok use, like doom scrolling. And if you agree to this, you will be pledging to put a permanent timer functionality on your TikTok. So the moment you start doom scrolling, there's going to be a timer in the top left that's constantly telling you and reminding you how long you have been on TikTok. That doesn't enforce or force anyone to tell them what to do, but it does raise awareness of the time moving, because when time is not visible in front of you while you're doom scrolling, it's only at the time you realize that you look at the time, then you notice that the time has eclipsed, right? Because we already talked about how time is relative in the mind, but time is technically relatively consistent when it's shown to you. So I thought about these type of quality of life situations, like how do you raise awareness but not dictate how people should behave. But it would be an interesting thought experiment, see how well it works. And if it's a modest, if it's a modest thing, like 4 minutes, 5 minutes, and then like average, 4%, 5%, that's still greater than 0%. Yeah, and when I stopped smoking, you said a ceiling of use that you ended up not even going to the using right to the top of that ceiling, which was very promising when you realized that, oh, that's nice. And you slowly lower that max usage over time. I'm glad to hear it. Yeah, I'm sure it would be quite a shock to a lot of people seeing their time spent. Unfortunately, those kind of things would likely have to be enforced by the government. It would be, yes. As businesses are unlike. Well, here's the thing. You can spin it. You're thinking specifically why business would not take this as a profit thing. Hear me out. There's so much pushback right now in a political sense. If there is a public announcement that they care about the sustainability of their children, that itself will turn over far more loyal profit getting than not right now. So that business sense is only assuming that the social depiction of companies are interested in product as opposed to object, like optics. So the way I presented it sounds provocative is largely because I'm framing it in a way that it is supplying a demand for a specific thing, and that might actually increase the sustainability of use of a product over time versus any singular product that might depreciate in the near future due to government pushback. So right now, if I was thinking like, oh, what is YouTube and Twitch and stuff going to think about in the future, it's nearly, at least in my opinion, inevitable that their margin is going to decrease due to the looming problem. But if you have a founder's effect in being a pro-sustainable YouTube, like a content provider for youth, that optics can assure your consistent profitability into the future by being the first to adopt that. So no, I actually disagree that it has to be enforced by the government. However, it requires a different type of selling point. For now, though, what it seems like is that one would want the government to enforce that. I think there is a market and there's a lot of vote of confidence when a developer says, we're going to be the first one who's not afraid to reduce our viewership time and ad exposure time on the event of promoting long-term investment in the ad space. What would that mean in terms of profit? There are going to be companies who rather be associated with a product that promotes health in this day and age online than a product that is slowly and possibly unintentionally sapping and harming youth. So I don't know where that caress is. I think it's getting to an inflection point where it's pretty obvious now. A conception is that there's poor optics and therefore bad for profitability for a company to ignore the looming problem, the stigma that's dealing with overconsumption of media. maybe the profit cost risk, the risk and profit is not good enough yet, but it's getting there. So it's going to, in my opinion, a hot take I would say in a predictability in the next 5 years is that the optics gain and the long-term profitability of image resulting from image is going to have a founder's effect. I'm curious which company or platform is going to start first. Roblox has already started some of this, and they're in collaboration with Google to try to make some of the stuff to be functionally productive for youth. So it's getting to a point where now the optics outweigh the possible PR risk of neglecting potential abuse of their platforms, and not like intentional abuse, but neglect, right? Negligence. Isn't it better to not state the purpose of experiment for better results? It is. It would be better. It would be better. However, that creates too much friction. So, the alternative, right? Like, here's a symptom behavioral analysis. Most of the doom scrolling is voluntary, right? And you have to compete with voluntary usage. If you and often that deals with disclaimers and transparency and whatnot. And these things are highly valued to make an experiment get lifted off the ground anyways, right? So what are the chances that an experiment would be utilized without transparency? It's a different, it's unfortunately at this point, that type of approach is incongruous with the current expectation of behavior. It would be ideal if it was blind to test the results, but at the same time, now at the expense of the results, you're hoping for a result, but the transparency may get a better early adoption, right? It's kind of like Duolingo and WaniKani. If no one shows up because of the premise of the product, it would be inconsistent with the expectations of the internet, right? Nowadays, transparency is the thing that causes adoption as opposed to the other way around. And dealing with the pragmatic and the scientific and objective results may be a little too insensitive and agnostic to early adoption. So unless, again, what Prokov said, if it's government enforced, then you can do those things without stating the purpose, right? However, the internet is not predicated on that. So if you're saying you don't have a choice, then usually it would be very unlikely to be considered, largely because of the vast majority of things. It is very ideal, though, pragmatically speaking. Is it feasible and realistic in practice? Probably not. Yeah, that's a good point. I've personally seen more content surrounding combating unhealthy behavior, like an increase, right? Has been an increase in trying to raise awareness of unhealthy behaviors as opposed to not at all, because these things were non-existent. The whole idea of doom scrolling, brain rot, is like the last 2 years, in my opinion. It has become, it's like increasing very rapidly, much like most internets. Once it catch on, it takes off. So I'm kind of curious when the inflection point is going to be. I think each one of the major platform corporations are playing a chicken game right now with each other. And I actually think, in my opinion, the founder's effect is going to be so powerful when that inflection point is hit, right? The moment one of the major platforms decide, we're taking a stance now, this is good PR, bam, it's going to send a cascade of every other platform trying to mirror it, right? So whatever that is, maybe we'll do a little fun like imaginary bet now, right here. I think it's going to be within the next 3 years. I have feeling it's going to be within the next 3 years. There's going to be a major reform. One of the tech giants is going to take the lead and say, yeah, we're going to cash out on this wildly built up tension regarding unregulated access that can potentially be linked to unhealthy behavior. It's not that far off, at least in my opinion. The Good Hearts Law, I was not aware of that. There's a name for it? Good Hearts. Oh. I see. Oh, I didn't even realize there was a name for it. Good Hertz law is the idea that a measure becomes less effective when it's used as a target. Yeah. Very quaint. It's slightly similar to the strong man creates good times create weak men. Yeah. Anyways, let me wrap it up by doing my review session, and then we're gonna go to Hanzi Hero. What turned into a 30-minute thing. You guys have like this weird impeccable timing right now. Like it starts with Gecko, then Morrow like pops in somewhere in between, and then you show up, Procol, and it just lines up. Now I'm half expecting someone else to show up. I'm secretly trying to like make a short session so I can like move my schedule 2 hours earlier. This is like the doom scrolling equivalent of streaming. People you want to see and talk to just shows up in a staggered form, so you're just like, all right, what's another hour? It's fine. What's another 2 hours? Nah, it's fine. Let's just entertain this idea. Meanwhile, it's 5 a.m. and then you're like seeing the sunrise and I'm barely seeing the sunrise. I'm glad to hear you're in good health, and you're I feel like Procol, I was just talking about I was sharing what you were sharing with me yesterday with Gecko. That was the start of the day. I'm glad to hear that you're back home and in comfort. And it seems like your enthusiasm for thought-provoking and life reflections did not escape you from the more recent events. It's nice to hear when someone is behaving very consistently after a not so fortunate event, right? I think that's very nice. Like if you're able to reflect and then suddenly resume what you typically do, that's kind of a really reassuring thing. At least not professional. This is not as professional advice, of course, but to me it sounds very reassuring, as opposed to like dropping everything you do and a dwelling and whatnot. That can be a time when someone requires a support system. All right, let's go over our harmonics. Tomorrow or the day after is going to be level up day, so it's going to be a big day the following day. I still have to find time to start playing Like a Dragon 8. All right, let's see. Man, measurement, origin, hole, leader, forehead, alligator, ceremony, spirit, branch, energy, center, world, plate, bamboo, thread, ear, insect, flowers, sea, red, R, shellfish, foot, knot, samurai, rice, loiter, bed, or pie, cliff, master, umbrella, beggar, horns, spikes. Play a game of Battlegrounds. Solid. Okay, and I think we're just gonna do the reads now. I think we're pretty good with these now. Okay, so yen, ana, se, Wait, is this? This is Kun, right? Yes. I think I might have wrote on before. Okay. Shu ta shu ta sha kyo and ko go to o e ga ori mo ara de de. Oh, there aren't any other things. Wow. Okay. De Q. Which one did they use for this? Sen? Right, sen. Oh, darn you. Me. Nen. So. Hi. Yaku. Ake. Ito. Ito. Mimi. Mushi. Mura. Dan. Cho. Hana. Mi. Kai. Aka. Soku. Sha. Fu. Bu. Shi. Don't do the other one. Ho. Seki. Okay. And then we'll try to do something different for the vocabulary when we level up. Yeah, either tomorrow or the day after. And then we have two things. So whatever we're doing right now, it's okay. Kakigori. Kakigori. Right, kakigori. I should listen to myself sometimes when I'm saying kakigori and typing what I hear, you know? It's a little disappointing. So I missed the rendaku. How'd I mess up the other one? Oh, I misread on Scott. Right, Scott. Scott. Okay. And that's it. Pretty good. Squeeze in a little, like, an hour and a half-ish to 2 hours of digression. Yeah, stay healthy, people. Moderate. Typing out how it sounds when you say it. Yeah. I said, so I usually say these things out loud, but now I say them in my head. So this is kakigori. But rendaku, when you're typing this, if you're reading this character here, is kori. Oh, so, oh, I realize this might not be helpful. But kakikori. So this is ko. However, in this word is go. Because it changes for reading. Rendaku changes for reading. So when I said kakigori in my head, the reason why I got this incorrect is I typed out kakikori, even though what I said in my head is gori, but I typed out kori. So what I'm saying in my head was not what I typed out, unfortunately. And that kind of happens with rendaku sometimes. It's also like saying, what's the difference between kori and kori? So if you don't say it, sometimes you are more likely to get these two confused. As often. It's one of those holding things. Most things happen like that. Like the difference between thanks versus thanks. 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 So saying them out loud sometimes helps with getting the correct writing, yeah, or pronunciation. Yeah. Yeah. And in this case, this is important. In English, it's not. English is largely non-functional. Largely non-functional. Yeah, so because in English, it would sound like emphasis. Emphasis, the stress accent of English is agnostic to the length of something. But in Japanese, it can mean a gigantic difference. Like kori, I don't even know what kori is. That's how weird. That's how the difference is. Kori and kori are. It could. Oh, here's one. Here's a good example. Biru versus biru. One's beer and one's building. So beer is biru. Biru is building. The difference between beer and building. Or another one would be like steiki and steaky. Steaky is like beautiful, lovely. Beautiful, lovely. And steaky is steak. So you could end up saying someone is lovely or someone's a steak. Is the inflection of your speech important as it is in English, like going up and the end of a yes, pitch accent, yes. So the other nuance of Japanese that people will eventually focus on is pitch accent. It does, yeah. Pitch also is functional. Not functional in the sense of English stress. So in the end of the day, changing up stress accent is to provide emphasis, basically, right? Like the functionality is usually emphasis in any way. And it's kind of like mere willy-nilly. It's not disciplined. In Japanese, it's disciplined. So pitch and length are disciplined. And they're literally written. The length is literally written into the language. English is not. Like the difference between a I'm trying to give an English analogy. Let me see. That's bad. That's bad. Right? But they're still related. It's emphasis. The difference is emphasis. You know, emphasized. As opposed to bad is a different word versus bad. Like, oh man, that is bad. Versus, that's bad. And then you have like all your different stress accents. Like, that's bad? Ooh, that's bad. Oh man, is that really bad? So all those are like functionally already intuited in English. In Japanese, it's like very disciplined. It's, you have to get it right, or like it's important that you understand these differences. In English, rules are meant to be broken. And I messed this up, obviously. So that's why it's important here. So kakiko, not kakiko. Kakiko. It's almost as having a different letter here, right? So instead of you messed up and said, instead of bad, you also messed up the emphasis, and now you're saying bad. And then now it's just a different word. Yeah, I think that's a off the top of my head, that's probably the closest analogy I can get. It's a neat thing. It actually learning Japanese has often made me a lot more disciplined with my English. Not to say this might be a weird flex. I think English, because they use stress accent, English speakers or anyone who has learned English can command, they can use stress. So both the volume, pitch, and speed to make English transformative. So the difference between talking at home with someone and giving a speech, right? When you're giving a speech, it requires a command of the English language that is functional. But most people don't give speeches. Most people don't stream with public speaking skills. They stream with conversational skills, and conversational skills are very in a way very flexible, like very loose. When in public speaking, if you want to sound confident, you can learn to project using English. You can, if you need to calm someone down, right? You lower your voice. You start extending your vocabulary. You can also talk very monotone with a very low range of pitch. You can also decide to very elongate and also go up and down in pitch to upset people, right? So in English, it has this flexibility, but generally speaking, right? Like how I'm pausing right now deliberately and emphasizing things. Those things are something that English speakers don't really use. They don't want to command this. It's not functional until you are required to do it. So the difference between someone who's excellent at speaking publicly is commanding stress accent. Is it as important as tones in Chinese for Japanese? I don't think so. And not for the reasons that they're not functional, but when it comes to, I guess we're referring to pitch accent, right? Or are we talking about English? I already said English, probably no, for the most part. But when it comes to pitch accent, it's I think the consequences of poor pitch accent is lessened because it's more nuanced. So I think I'm gonna echo what I'm gonna echo what Gecko said earlier, where because of its nuanced level, it can be generalized well enough to serve a function, right? So because of its nuance, how subtle it is able to still generalize without the command of pitch accent. However, it is nice to understand that nuance. So it's hard to master. Pitch accent is difficult to master at the cost of being very like ease in terms of introductory, like baseline and foundations. Chinese have a higher introduction because the stress has a very large pronounced functionality, right? However, I would say it's arguably less likely to encounter problems and match like a higher level use, right? Because since the barrier is higher, you're closer to a higher aptitude. But it's also then the mastery of Chinese is a little bit more optional than the nuance gained from Japanese. So in the end, if you're going to like really love these languages, they're going to balance out. But the initial entry is that pitch accent is more optional than Chinese tones, because tones are part of the functionality. And pitch accent is, in some cases, actually, like hana and hana are two different things. Kami and kami, right? Kami and kami are two different things. Ame and ami are two different things. So those are the only examples I have right off the top of my head, because I'm like keeping track of all the ones in which pitch accent differentiates between common words that I already know. Like ame is rain, and ame is hard candy, I think, because I always think ame is coming from the sky, so you're dropping down. Ame, and then ame is hard candy. It's just the other thing that I know that's ame so far, right? And then kami, sky it's God. Kami, and then kami is hair, I think. I think that's the pitch accent for hair, and kami for paper. Paper is also, there's a slight variance between paper and hair that I can't really hear very well, so I don't use them enough, So these subtleties in context, when you say kami, it's hard to confuse the context of God with paper and hair in a sentence. So oftentimes pitch accent is very flexible. In Chinese, if you mess up the tone, it's going to be that no matter the context. You still can figure it out, but that word stays there in that context a lot of times, largely because it's very abrupt. Like, it's abrupt enough to create a stutter or a pause. And that's kind of how I equate it. Neither is harder or easier. Largely, it's more like they're different. So, but if I had to talk about the functional behavioral aspect of it, I think you'll get a lot of pause and a lot more longer brainstorming, but you'll still get the message across when an inappropriate tone is being used versus an inappropriate pitch accent. And I do not aim to have Japanese pitch accent. I pick it up as I go if I can. If I can't resolve it, then it's largely okay for me, for my purposes. And then in Chinese, it's not optional. It's generally not optional to not be able to at least do the gross tones. Ah, and ah. If you cannot command those four principal functional tones, which I don't think that's true. Anyone who speaks another language is able to distinguish the four principal tones, largely because they're really not subtle. At most, tone 3 is the least one, but you can actually get away with not really executing tone 3 that much. The 3 tones, they're really different. And if you can already do it in Japanese, you can do it in Chinese, because it's almost like getting closer and closer to English. English does these gross pitch changes and stuff. And Chinese, in my opinion, is still kind of agnostic to how long something is. So Japanese is sensitive to length, right? Mora, but it's also written in, so you can't really mix that up. In Chinese, if you decide to say something a little bit longer, it's okay. Like 孩子,孩子, like you're holding something long, but as long as it's going up, and then it's shortening, you can still get child. It will sound a little weird, but it doesn't create a sudden change, a dramatic change. So length is a little less sensitive, in my opinion, in Chinese. You can get like really elongated things as long as the pitch, the tone is going in that direction. Like you can extend the tone, like ah, right? Like you can go ah, ah, like it's still going up. It's still doing the two. So if you keep all your lengths consistent a little bit, your tones are still going up in the same thing. It doesn't create like the bidu versus bidu situation, at least in my opinion. Like mama versus mama, they're still going to be mother. It's one neutral. English doesn't care about any of these technically, but they also do care about it. It's for feeling. And that's why I kind of like English when it comes to studying speech. When you often talk about Japanese, when you're watching anime and stuff, they sound a certain way, and there's a certain like consistency to vocal performance. In my opinion, this is my personal opinion. In vocal performances, like serious guys sound consistently serious. So like the nice consistency about Japanese voice acting or acting in general is that when you love like a serious Japanese tone and then you hear all the other actors, it almost feels like you always love it, right? Because though their nuances of their language is a bit more restrictive than English. English can be hit and miss. Someone's serious tone can sound like someone else's joking tone. If you know what I mean. Like there's no functional discipline in it. So when you're watching a samurai film, which is supposed to be serious, and you like that stuff, it seems like every voice actor is pretty cool in that way because it's very consistent. It's, in my opinion, it's very disciplined. So when you're seeing anime, like what does anime, schoolgirl sound like? It sounds remarkably disciplined in consistent execution. In English, it could be an obnoxious schoolgirl. It could be like what does a bouncy schoolgirl sound like? Well, you have multiple versions of them because the language doesn't necessarily dictate how you stress properly consistently. There's no stress consistency to creating a particular feel, and then it varies so dramatically between how people interpret that, right? So that's, in my opinion, a way to illustrate how loose. In Chinese, it's a bit looser. It's slightly more looser in terms of when someone's trying to emphasize something. When they emphasize something, it can be lengthier because length is mobile. Japanese length is not that mobile, and volume is mobile. So now hear me out. In Japanese, one of the things that is more mobile in Japanese is volume. They don't account for volume. So when you're thinking about like, how does Japanese get more powerful? They get louder. They like scream, like cue your anime character that has a shouting match with another person. Or you get really quiet, right? Like a quiet character. A quiet character just speaks very softly. Or then you have like volume articulation, because in my opinion, there's more flexibility in volume. Now you're thinking those are the properties of English. What is being more flexible is often more flexible and artistic for interpretation in the language that is restrictive. So in Chinese, you can get like like you get like really elongated and short spoken things because it's very flexible. It doesn't really affect as much the meaning. And then in Japanese, when I think about like really boastful and personalities that stick out, it's usually volume dependent. someone who's very loud versus someone who's very quiet, because the other parts of the language is functional. So you can't get too far away, or else they're going to mess up with the meaning. Right? It's going to make it sound awkward, unless you're deliberately trying to do that, of course. And in English, all of those things are flexible. So when you're listening to a dub in English, it can be way off the mark. Like, someone could be stressing in a different way. They can sound too loud most of the time, or they can sound too fast. They can sound too like pitchy. All their English is too pitchy. So it's crazy. And that's kind of how I feel like when you think about the impact also of the meaning. English has a lot of inconsistencies, but it's not a cause or an effect. The inconsistencies of stress accent and the use of stress accent reflects the users. There are so many people who use English with their discipline of their parental language. So if you're a Japanese speaker, that English sounds Japanese, and it's still intelligible in Japanese. So when a Japanese English speaker is sad and happy, they actually sound as though they're speaking Japanese. You can pick up the emotions, the reliance of a Japanese English speaker's performance based on how you understand their language. Their volume tends to go up and down, in my opinion. Not that I've data mined. This is anecdotal. I'm trying to like kind of make sense of what my understanding of this language is. When you hear a Japanese person try to speak English, when they're trying to elicit like different types of emphasis, the English probably gets louder and quieter. It doesn't necessarily get more stressed, like more accented, or the pitch goes up and down. It gets pitchier. It just gets louder and quieter. It doesn't get faster or shorter very often. So when you're playing lots of video games, right, and you're hearing like different languages and different backgrounds, you can pick up these little things, and learning those languages make you like appreciate it more. Where, oh, okay, so if I were to act, right, if I were to use English and I would act, I would rely a lot more on tonal stressing. Tonal stretching and length. A lot of times I don't usually use volume too much. Like, I don't get substantially louder and substantially quieter more often than I change my pitch and my length of my words. So not that you can't command all of these. I think through a lot of practice and use of speaking in English in public spaces and different people, I think, in my opinion, not for better or for worse, if this is for better or for worse, English requires a lot of feeling and dexterity, largely because the properties of length, volume, and pitch is much more flexible than Chinese. And then Chinese is still a little bit more flexible than Japanese. And it comes with its pros and cons. Japanese language performances, like voice acting and the appeal of anime, like when you hear Japanese, it's so nicely consistent. So if you like Japanese voice acting and like acting in general, when it comes to the language itself, not like the body language, we're not talking about like body language and facial expressions and stuff, just specifically listening to the language, it's so consistently satisfying if you already find Japanese satisfying. In Chinese, it's slightly more of a hit or miss, and it's often dealing with elongation and volume, because elongation and volume rarely has an impact on their things. So they would either be loud or slightly slurry or not slurry, and that can create hit or miss. And then in English, it's everything. Like, generally speaking, everything is just out the window. So the chances of you consistently liking English stuff, it's a consequence of how many people use English, right? Like, you can hate the way German's sound in English because it has German properties, like German like English. And then you might like how a Japanese... I don't really like inherently the I'm very sensitive to loud volume changes. So whenever I hear a Chinese person speak American English and they're trying to emphasize things, it gets louder. Like it gets louder and longer. So the sound gets like harsher, like it blows out my ears and it gets louder. So whenever my parents speak and they try to like argue or something and whatnot, the volume increases and the length of their syllables get louder, like louder and longer. And that's the only usually like that's the major principle of the changes. So it gets a little harsh on my ears. So that's how I narrow down why when people argue in Chinese, it always sounds like it's louder. You don't necessarily have to get louder in English. You can do other ways to emphasize things without potentially ruining the meaning. Not that people don't associate getting louder for being angry and whatnot. It's still kind of universal, right? There are things largely that someone can get really angry when they get quieter in English, right? Like I wouldn't say, oh, okay, yeah, I see. So that's how it is. Versus, I don't know how to do a Japanese accent. Like, shine, you know, like you're just getting louder as you're going, but you're not trying to alter too much of your mora. That's my only impression of like a Japanese like a person running like die or something, you know, like that's what they yell. So you can hear the accent of the volume going up, but you're trying not to affect too much of everything else, or else you're going to get a different word. Yeah, do your parents have to go to language for talking with each other in specific scenarios? Wait, each other in specific scenarios. My parents don't speak English at all most of the time. They might say yes or no sometimes. I usually go and help them interpret. So a lot of times that they don't need to worry about juggling languages, if that's what you're asking. In any specific scenario, it's all scenarios. It's nondescript. Anytime English is or another language is involved. And Fujonese is close enough to Mandarin in these characteristics that they're comfortable in doing that. Yeah, I had a teacher in your school that everyone knew when they went quiet, it was time to stop messing about. Yeah, exactly. And hear me out. When you guys watch like Japanese content, if you guys watch Japanese content, Chinese content, when you're learning a new language, if you're ever interested in learning a new language, I would love to hear what you observe consistently when it comes to like spoken language. I personally love hearing language like it's music. So when I'm listening to sounds, I hear I like to think about the sounds people make, like what I'm saying right now, in the properties of music. Like, is the pitch higher? Is the volume going up? Is it speeding up? And oftentimes, that's how I picture languages I don't understand. So for the longest time, I listened to a lot of Japanese, Mandarin, and Cantonese, and whenever I can't comprehend the meaning anymore, I hear more of the pitches, the inflections, and the volume and stuff, because it sounds like music. I'm trying to capture the emotions from it. So after many of these years, that's kind of what I came to normalize. Like, how do you start sounding like an angry Japanese person? You raise your volume. You raise your volume. Like, in a very sharp way? And then how do you get like a more ditzy look? You raise your volume, but you're like slightly raising it. You're pulsating the volume up and down. And then how do you get really quiet? You know, when you try and be shy, you're dampening your volume constantly. And if you're like really startled and stuff, you would dampen and go up, dampen, neutral, dampen, and neutral. But you don't necessarily change too much, like stretch out too much of your things, like stretch out and or get too pitchy. Because if you get too pitchy, it's gonna sound really weird. Like Japanese sounds really weird when you're pitchy, when you're trying to do like the whole pitchy shake thing dramatically. But in English, you can sound like a goofball. Like there's just so many variances, and that to me is the best way to explain, in my opinion. It's not just that Japanese sounds so consistent and always good or bad to an English speaker, right? Like inherently, if you're into anime and manga, you will think Japanese sound consistent because it's a volume change most of the time. So if you like that already, it is very, very consistent. Japanese language is incredibly rigid, disciplined, like their culture. It's really disciplined. So when you like the thing, you're going to really like it consistently. English is not disciplined. It is all over the place. So many people have their own interpretations of what English should sound like when they're trying to be angry, mad, sarcastic. Like the internet is a circus in a really wholesome way. I actually like that idea. I actually like that characteristic of English, but it's a hit or miss for most people because people have strong preferences, right? Maybe these live streams will be the catalyst for you to learning Japanese or Chinese. I do want to be able to interact with your studying content rather than just distracting. That's perfectly fine. Do you know another language, Procol? I don't remember. I know you're from somewhere else, right? Spanish? Eventually I'll start Spanish. Okay. Keep that in mind. I'm going to take a quick break and I'm going to end this segment, right? Thanks for hanging out. I hope any of this is interesting. I talk about Chinese and Japanese and English as much as I can because that's how I stay interested in the language. You're from England. You can speak a little German and French. Okay. I have no experience with German and French, unfortunately, except like Auf Wiedersehen and Guten Tag and like I don't know, what is it? Au revoir and like s'il vous plaît. You're like your introduction to German and French for like 1 month in high school. That's about all I got. Anyways, I'll be back. Oui, yes, oui, baguette. Sorry to all the French speakers out there. Maybe Gecko can teach me some French. When Gecko is multilingual. So, anyways, hopefully this was interesting. I know most of this, take a grain of salt. It's not accurate. It's my perception as I'm learning more Japanese and Chinese. I'm trying to learn Japanese and Chinese more to explain some of the things that I've noticed when I was growing up. Like, notice in acting performances. I love movie, theater, writing, video games, voice acting, right? These things often deal with language. So there are things that I've noticed that occur very often, but I have no knowledge. I do not command Japanese and Chinese enough to understand or try to put together an explainer. Now, are the explainers accurate? Probably not. I mean, I don't know a lot of Japanese and I don't know a lot of Chinese. The idea is it's fun to consider if these things are true or not. So for anyone who's listening who's like, nah, and stuff, it's like, I want to hear what your opinions are, right? Like, did you learn like this and then did it click with you or something? I personally think it's really interesting from this perspective of like stress accent, pitch, volume, that you can start to narrow down how voice performances and acting performances and emotional expression is different by the constraints of the language itself. All right, so thanks for hanging out for WaniKani and Japanese. That's the end of our Japanese session today. So we're gonna watch this later. Arigatou gozaimasu. Right. Until then, 皆さん、またね。じゃあね。And I will be right back. I'm gonna take a quick bathroom break. I'll be back to my Hanzi hero lesson. Thank you.